Hey truckers, today we're seeing part 6 of I Have a City in an Alternate World. Let's dive into the video. The Mother Tree Tower had become history, and the remnants of the Mother Tree stump had been through countless years of wind and rain. It was unknown if the tree spirits still had any bloodline left in this wilderness. Regardless of whether there were still descendants of the Tree Spirit clan, the things left behind on Yuelang Peak already belonged to Tangjin. If the other party really came to ask for them one day, Tangjin would not be polite and order them to leave. The past was already over. Tangjin was not interested in the right and wrong of the story. He was only concerned about how much benefits this building foundation could bring him. The Mother Tree was very powerful. If it was built and upgraded, it would definitely bring huge returns to Tangjin in the long run. Whether it was in terms of daily life or military, he could borrow the Mother Tree's power. The only thing he needed to consider now was that after building the two towers, the resources needed for upgrading would be extremely huge. In fact, in some powerful towers, there would often be several auxiliary towers with special attributes. However, the problem was that these old towers were very powerful in themselves and often had more than 1,000 years of historical accumulation. It was not too difficult to develop the main tower while taking into account the auxiliary towers. However, for a new city with fewer resources or a shorter construction period, it would be difficult to develop the main city and the auxiliary city at the same time. For example, Black Rock City had a history of almost 1,000 years. However, it only had a level 4 main tower and had never built a secondary tower. Tangjin would never believe that Black Rock City did not have such resources. However, there were only two reasons why Black Rock City did not build an auxiliary tower. The first reason was that they only wanted to strengthen the main tower and did not want the auxiliary towers to share the limited resources. The second reason was that they had not obtained a satisfactory auxiliary tower foundation so far. In order to determine the attributes of the foundation stone, there was no other way to determine the attributes of the foundation stone of the city building except to obtain it from the destroyed buildings or to analyze the details of the cleared wild buildings. Before Tangjin built the tower, he didn't know the attributes of the foundation stone. After the construction was successful, he found out that the attributes of his tower were actually related to the Ghost Bank. It wasn't good or bad, but it felt like he was trying his luck. Therefore, a top-grade foundation stone with clear attributes could be auctioned for a sky-high price on the foundation stone trading platform. This was because one did not have to bear the risk of luck. After all, no one's brain came from the wind. When building it, one had to bear the risk of monsters attacking the city. Thus, one had to be careful before using it. Whoever had the ability to appraise the foundation stone's attribute would definitely make a fortune. Tangjin put away the Mother Tree's foundation stone. As for whether to build it, he would decide after he returned. What he needed to do now was to head to the roots of the Mother Tree. According to the records in the books, the roots of the Mother Tree had the ability to gather precious minerals and gems. The tree spirits often collected and processed them. Now that the Mother Tree was dead, he did not know if there were still any gems left. Tangjin was already familiar with the passage that he was going down. Therefore, his speed was very fast. However, he paused for a moment when he reached the bottom. Finally, he chose a wider passage and walked down. The infrasonic wave opened up the path again. Tangjin walked and stopped. Finally, he walked to the depths of the ground where the Mother Tree's roots were located. What he saw was a scene of devastation. It was obvious that the roots of the Mother Tree had been severely damaged by the mutated tree maggots, and the underground space was filled with broken roots. Tangjin's eyes swept around. He quickly discovered some fingernail-sized gemstones of various colors in the remnant soil. There were also some different colored metal particles. Each of them was the size of a soybean. Tangjin put away all the gemstones and metal particles that he saw. He inadvertently discovered that a smooth wall had appeared in front of him. He moved forward and carefully observed it, only to discover that this so-called wall was actually an extremely large yellow jade. This piece of yellow jade was the size of a house. It was soft and warm. It was covered with fine purple hair patterns and looked very beautiful. After using the purple electric short sword to cut it, Tang Jin discovered that its hardness was not inferior to metal. Moreover, it also had a very strong toughness. Perhaps this wasn't a piece of jade at all, but something special. Tang Jin didn't know much about jade, much less the products of the Luqing world. However, the appearance of this yellow jade caused him to think of the problem of finding a coin to replace his brain. It seemed that this thing in front of him was the ideal material for making coins. It was beautiful and not easy to imitate. Most importantly, Tang Jin liked it. However, although it was not bad, how to cut it and how to make it into coins was a problem. Fortunately, Tang Jin was already prepared. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had the idea of using this yellow jade to make coins. This was because Tang Jin had seen a very suitable application in the application store. Super laser carving machine, able to cut large objects at high speed and carve nanoscale patterns. Extremely efficient, accurate, and beautiful. Download amount, 2,000 gold coins. Tang Jin opened the application store and downloaded the application. Updates tnvel/buy.com. The application was successfully activated, and a crisscrossing red line was immediately drawn in front of him. Tang Jin could adjust the size by himself, and then he could start the cutting. As the lasers flickered up and down, the yellow jade was instantly cut into pieces and fell to the ground. Each piece was a square meter and 2 millimeters thick. Tang Jin picked up a thin piece of jade and broke it with force. The yellow jade piece broke from the middle, which also proved that yellow jade was very suitable for making coins. After the cut jade pieces were piled on the ground, Tang Jin followed the instructions and used the provided pattern template to piece together the pattern that needed to be carved. Then, he could use the super laser engraving machine to carve. Tang Jin designed a picture of a coin with a dragon on the back and the words Holy Dragon City on the front. Then, he confirmed that the carving had started. This time, countless lasers covered these jade slips. The constantly flashing light could almost blind people. Tang Jin didn't dare to look directly at the working scene of the super laser carving machine. 5 minutes later, the dense laser beams finally stopped flashing. The application notified him that his work was completed. Only then did Tang Jin dare to open his eyes to look at the scene on the ground. He saw that the ground that was originally filled with thin jade pieces was now densely covered with yellow jade coins. There were at least 50,000 of them. Tang Jin picked up a coin and examined it. He discovered that the carving was extremely exquisite. The pattern was also vivid and lifelike, appearing extremely exquisite. Tang Jin nodded his head in satisfaction when he saw this. He waved his hand and kept all the money. However, the amount of coins was far from enough for Tang Jin's needs. Therefore, he continued to cut and carve. After repeating it 5 times in a row, he finally stopped. As for the huge jade stone, a small half of it had been consumed. After using the soil to cover the remaining jade, Tang Jin patted the dust off his body. He got up and left the underground cave. He came to the entrance of the cave on the ground. At this moment, there were still some kobolds guarding the entrance of the cave. When they saw Tang Jin coming out, they immediately pounced over. Tang Jin held the purple lightning short sword and killed all the kobolds in a short time. Then, he quickly ran in the direction of the Holy Dragon City. In the endless wilderness, Tang Jin rapidly advanced in the direction of the Holy Dragon City. During this period, there were some wandering low-level monsters that tried to attack him, but they were all killed by him with a swing of his sword. Currently, Tangjin's cultivation had already advanced to rank 4. Killing some low-level monsters could be said to be as easy as blowing off dust. However, killing such monsters would not help him in increasing his cultivation. Therefore, unless those monsters were seeking death, Tangjin would not bother with them at all. Suddenly, the sound of weapons clashing came from the front. Tangjin immediately stopped and took out his binoculars to observe in the direction of the sound. After a while, Tangjin put down the binoculars. An inexplicable smile appeared on the corner of his mouth and he immediately headed straight to the scene of the battle. On the gravel plain, 2 groups of people were engaged in a fierce battle. From time to time, someone would be injured by a sword, blood splattering everywhere, and screams of pain could be heard. Tangjin was very familiar with one of the groups. It was the cultivator battle team from Black Rock City. There were more than 30 people in total. They wore the same uniform and held swords in their hands. They formed a battle formation and appeared to be in an orderly manner when they faced the enemy. The other group of people looked a little frightened and strange. There were about 50 to 60 of them, far more than the number of cultivators in Blackstone City. They were all wearing heavy black leather armor made of crocodile skin. Most of their weapons were long knives and broadswords, while some of the cultivators in black armor used red bone spears that were 3 meters long. Judging from the uniform equipment and weapons of these people, it was obvious that they belonged to an organized force. However, for some unknown reason, they had a conflict with the cultivators of Black Rock City, which resulted in them pointing their swords at each other. What made Tangjin interested was that the faces of these black-armored cultivators were already extremely deformed from their noses up. They looked like malevolent ghosts. However, after taking a closer look, Tangjin discovered that these cultivators' faces were actually covered with a kind of strange insect. They wrapped around the upper half of their faces and more than a dozen tentacles pierced deeply into the cultivators' acupuncture points such as Sun, Jade Pillow, and Bai Hui. There were also 2 half-foot-long tentacles in front of their foreheads that were shaking from time to time. EUW evils up Tez on NOV/L/BI.com. Every time these cultivators were agitated, the tentacles of the face-applying bugs would shake violently. And every time these cultivators were in danger or at the brink of death, the face-applying bugs would turn red again. Then, the cultivator's strength would immediately surge, and his whole person would go crazy. He would not feel a knife or sword stabbing his body, which was quite terrifying. Tangjin saw a cultivator whose face-covering bug had turned red. He dragged his intestines and internal organs that were all over the ground and desperately bit the lower leg of a Black Rock City cultivator. Even though his head was cut off by a sword, he continued to bite. Only when the red color of the face-covering bug faded did the cultivator die. The monster detector locked onto the strange face-dressing bug, but it did not get any information. This meant that the face-dressing bug was not a monster, but just a strange bug. In the face of this group of crazy cultivators with face-covering bugs, the cultivator battle team from Black Rock City was strong and had good cooperation. However, 5 people were still killed. As for the cultivators with face-covering bugs, more than 10 of them were dead. After shifting his gaze away from the face-covering insect cultivator, Tangjin looked at the Black Rock City's cultivator battle team. To be more precise, he looked at a youth in the cultivator battle team. This was because this person was the youth Xiao Rui who had a secret deal with Tangjin. It was because of the information provided by the young man that Tangjin was able to clean up the treasure room in Black Rock City. He did not expect to meet him here today. However, Xiao Rui had already been promoted to a rank 3 cultivator. Among the cultivators from Blackstone City, he was one of the few with a higher cultivation. The young man, Little Rui, had very sharp senses. When Tangjin was observing him, he also felt Tangjin's gaze. He turned his head to look at Tangjin and then pretended not to know Tangjin. He continued to swing his sword and fight with the face-covering insect cultivators. In reality, both parties had already discovered Tang Jin's existence ever since he appeared near the battlefield. However, no one dared to act rashly. After all, Tang Jin's current strength had already reached rank 4. The aura of his cultivation that he revealed was very obvious. The two parties that were currently fighting were unable to figure out his intention for coming. Since he was merely watching from the side and did not attack, no one would invite a rebuff and provoke him. The leader of the face-covering insects and the leader of the Black Rock City cultivators were both at level 4. At this moment, the two of them were locked in a fierce battle. Due to the strange ability of the face-covering insects, the combat power of the leader of the black-armored cultivators was obviously higher. The leader of the cultivators from Black Rock City was at a disadvantage and was worried about how to escape from this situation. When he saw Tang Jin, he was delighted and immediately shouted, "My friend, we are cultivators from Black Rock City. Please help us kill these insect bandits. Black Rock City will definitely reward you handsomely." After the leader of the cultivators from Black Rock City shouted out his words, the insect cultivators that he called the insect bandits immediately looked at Tang Jin with vigilance. Some cultivators even faintly moved closer to him in case he suddenly attacked. Tang Jin coldly laughed when he saw this. He was extremely disdainful of the actions of the leader of Black Rock City. If he thought that he would be dragged into this with just a sentence, he was really too naive. Black Rock City was considered his enemy. How could he help them? However, that young man called Xiao Rui was still useful to him. He could not let him die here. However, the term insect bandits mentioned by the leader of the cultivators in Black Rock City made Tang Jin recall the various forces in the wilderness that Qianlong had once introduced to him. One of them was the introduction of this insect bandit. It was said that before the insect bandits became famous, they were a group of ordinary wanderers and wild cultivators. When they explored a strange wild building, they found some strange insects. Some of these insects were like scorpions and could attach themselves to the arm. They could control it with their thoughts and shoot out a kind of hard poisonous sting. Some insects could change their limbs, turning human arms into bone knives or growing countless tentacles. In addition, there were also many insects with strange functions. The insect thieves kept it a secret, and only their own people knew about it. Anyone who had seen it had already turned into bones. The bug thieves had the most bugs, and they were these face-applying bugs that could cover the face and greatly increase the user's strength. However, the side effects of using these face-applying bugs were very great. In less than 10 years, the user would enter a state of exhaustion. However, the bug thieves did not care. Every member would wear a face-applying bug, which made the face-applying bug the main symbol of the bug thieves. Relying on these strange insects, the insect thieves quickly rose up in the nearby area and became one of the major forces that the wanderers were extremely afraid of, so they wouldn't easily provoke them. However, he did not know what was wrong with the insect bandits this time. They actually dared to provoke the overlord of this region, Black Rock City. Were they not afraid of Black Rock City's revenge? After Tang Jin thought of this, he took a deep look at the leader of the insect bandits. Perhaps, this group of people who were neither human nor ghost had already become the pawns of some faction. Thinking about it, the sudden outbreak of the undead race this time had caused Black Rock City to be in a terrible state, and their own strength had also suffered a great loss. At this time, some organizations that coveted Black Rock City's territory would take the opportunity to attack and hit them when they were down. It was not impossible. If he were to rashly intervene, it would bring trouble to himself no matter which side he helped. When Tang Jin thought of this, he decided to sit on the fence and wait for the outcome of the battle to be decided before making any other plans. The two sides of the battle saw that Tang Jin did not move for a long time and thought that he did not want to get involved in this muddy water. After all, the two sides of the battle were two famous forces in the vicinity. No matter how high Tang Jin's cultivation was, he was just a lone ranger. No matter who he offended, it would be enough for him to suffer. After thinking up to this point, the two groups no longer bothered with Tang Jin and continued to bury their heads in the battle. Unfortunately, Tang Jin did not know what these people were thinking. Otherwise, he would definitely smile in disdain. If he were to take action, with his current level 4 cultivation and the weapons in his storage space, it was likely that more than half of the cultivators present would die in his hands. The remaining half would be difficult to please. Just as Tang Jin was watching the battle with his arms crossed, a long howl could be faintly heard from far away. The leader of the cultivators from Black Rock City revealed a look of joy, but the face of the leader of the insect bandits changed. Tang Jin turned his gaze towards the direction where the voice had originated from. He saw a human figure pouncing toward the battle like a bolt of lightning. After seeing this scene, Tang Jin's pupils slightly shrunk. From the speed of this person's movement, it was likely that his cultivation was not weak. At the very least, he had to reach rank 5 before he could possess such might. From the looks of it, they didn't seem to have good intentions. Looking at the joyful expressions on the faces of the cultivators from Black Rock City, he was afraid that the other party was reinforcements from Black Rock City. In the face of such strong reinforcements, the situation of this group of insect bandits was not good. Tang Jin was slightly unhappy that he was unable to see the cultivators of Black Rock City suffer a loss. However, this was not the time for him to make a move. He still needed to wait for the right opportunity. At this moment, the figure had already arrived in front of them. After he steadied himself, the crowd realized that it was an old man. The old man was wearing a robe sewn from an unknown material. He had a strong body, his white hair was tied into a ponytail, and his expression was gloomy. He stood proudly in the middle of the two sides, not worried that the insect thieves would take the opportunity to attack. The old man's aura was imposing. After his cold eyes swept across everyone present, he spoke to the leader of the insect bandits. "My Black Rock City and your insect bandits have never crossed each other's path. Why are you surrounding and ambushing the cultivators of my Black Rock City today? If you don't give me an explanation, then none of you shall leave." The old man's words were firm and decisive. Coupled with his rank 5 cultivation, he was not arrogant. The leader of the insect bandits took a step forward and cupped his hands before his chest. "Is that Elder Emo from Black Rock City?" he asked the old man. "I'm Zhao Gu, the third leader of the insect masters. Today's incident was completely started by you, the cultivators of Black Rock City. We just want an explanation. Black Rock City is the overlord of this region, we naturally do not wish to offend them. However, if we do not say a word even when they are riding on our necks, then we, the insect thieves, will not be able to continue living in this world." After Zhao Gu had finished speaking, he glanced at the cultivators from Black Rock City who were filled with killing intent and coldly snorted with an expressionless face. After hearing Zhao Gu, who called himself the third leader of the insect masters, say this, Elder Emo of the Black Rock City cast his gaze towards his own camp with a questioning look in his eyes. When the rank 4 cultivator in the lead saw this, he quickly walked over and reported the entire situation to Elder Mo. It turned out that ever since the Undead Clan's outbreak, Black Rock City had been in a state of suppression. Many things that could only be done outside the city could no longer be completed, including the work of gathering some precious materials. These materials were essential for Black Rock City's trading goods. Now that they had been completely depleted, they would have to be replenished if they wanted to continue production. However, the Undead Clan had surrounded Black Rock City. It was not an easy task to break through their blockade. However, the corpse race was only surrounding the city and not attacking. As long as the cultivators of Black Rock City did not try to break through the blockade, the corpse race would not take the initiative to enter the defensive range of Black Rock City's buildings. However, in that case, Blackstone City would be like a tiger trapped in a cave. There were hunters armed with guns outside, and they would be in a dilemma. Fortunately, there was the Cornerstone trading platform that allowed them to exchange for limited food. Black Rock City also had their own special food to save their lives, so the residents of Black Rock City barely had to go hungry. However, as time went by, the disadvantages of being surrounded by the undead race began to show, especially one of the products that Black Rock City mainly purchased from the Cornerstone trading platform. It had always been one of the main points income of Black Rock City, but now that the raw materials had been exhausted, they were completely out of stock. Since there were no more goods to sell, there was naturally no point income. Without points, he could not buy the materials he needed on the Cornerstone trading platform. It was like living at home. One couldn't live without firewood, rice, oil, salt, sauce, vinegar, and tea. Otherwise, one wouldn't be able to live. There were close to 10,000 people in Black Rock City. The daily consumption was also extremely large. It was not obvious on normal days, but now that they were besieged by the Corpse Clan, the internal affairs of Black Rock City were immediately in chaos. The citizens of Black Rock City were not allowed to have points. They only had coins to replace points. Unfortunately, they could not buy what they wanted with these coins. Even the supply of food was decreasing. The citizens of Black Rock City were worried, but no one dared to say anything out in the open for fear of bringing them unnecessary trouble. The people in power in Black Rock City did not care about what the residents thought. To them, as long as the residents did not starve to death, there would not be any trouble. However, the problem was that after the point income channel was cut off, the cultivation resources of the cultivators in Black Rock City were also cut off. This was the most fatal thing. There was no doubt that powerful martial strength was the foundation of Black Rock City's standing in the endless wilderness. If the resources to sustain the cultivators' daily training could not be guaranteed, and the cultivators' combat power was damaged, then Black Rock City might really be in danger of being destroyed. To make matters worse, the brains that were originally stored to tide over the crisis were all gone because of the accidental theft of the treasure room. The governor of Black Rock City was so angry that he swore to tear the thief into pieces. Without the brain to exchange for points, the higher-ups of Black Rock City were at their wits' end. After all, they did not have many points in their pockets. Follow US stories at nvl/by/n.com. The governor of Black Rock City still had a batch of high-level brain beads, which he had kept away. However, these were reserves that could only be used when the city was in danger of being destroyed and could not be touched easily. Looking at the current situation, it didn't seem like they had reached the point of burning their boats. Hence, Black Rock City decided to break through the zombie race's blockade and head to the origin of the materials to collect them. However, for some unknown reason, the original origin of the materials had already been taken by someone else. All the required materials had been plundered, and even the origin had been destroyed. Snatching food from a tiger's mouth would never have happened in the past. This was because everyone knew that this was the forbidden area of Black Rock City and would take a detour when they passed by. However, now that Black Rock City was in a crisis, all sorts of evildoers had come out to take advantage of the situation. Some of them had even destroyed the origin of raw materials and openly provoked Black Rock City. Unwilling to return empty-handed, the cultivators of Black Rock City decided to head to another location to harvest after some discussion. However, that place was the area controlled by the insect bandits. As a result, one of the insect bandits who had tried to stop the cultivators from Black Rock City was killed. The insect bandits who had rushed over after hearing the news were not willing to let this go. As soon as the two sides disagreed, they immediately drew their swords and started slashing at each other. After Elder Mo heard of the incident, he glanced at the Black Rock City cultivator who had attacked, and a trace of helplessness flashed across his eyes. It was his troublesome grandson's doing again. Didn't he know that Black Rock City was currently plagued with internal and external problems and that it was not wise to provoke a strong enemy? These people were like hungry wolves in the wilderness. Although they were usually polite to Black Rock City, that was because they did not dare to fall out with the powerful Black Rock City. However, once Black Rock City's power declined, these people would be the first to pounce on them and bite them. After thinking about this, Elder Emo looked at the leader of the insect bandits and said slowly, "I already know the whole story of this matter. No matter what, Black Rock City has done something wrong in this matter. However, both sides have suffered casualties. Why don't we let this matter go? I wonder what Leader Xiaogu thinks." When Elder Emo had rushed over, Xiaogu was already prepared to die together with him. He did not expect that Elder Emo would actually suggest such a thing. Naturally, he was more than happy to hear it. Xiaogu cupped his hands and bowed to Elder Emo. "Since Elder Emo has said so, I, Xiaogu, will naturally comply. We will let this matter rest. We will meet again." Xiaogu waved his hand and left with a gloomy face. The surrounding insect thieves immediately gathered and followed behind him. They quickly disappeared into the wild grass. Elder Emo looked at the bug bandits that were leaving, and a cold glint flashed in his eyes before it disappeared. Elder Emo slowly turned his head towards Tangjin. His voice suddenly turned cold and hard as he asked in an emotionless tone, "This passerby who did not help the cultivators of my Black Rock City. Do you have any last words before you die?" Tangjin's expression turned cold when he heard this. He sneered and replied, "What a great Black Rock City, what a tyrannical Elder Emo. I wonder what kind of mistake I've committed. Please tell me so that I can die with an understanding of the situation." Emo Chang's eyes were cold as he looked at Tangjin. He spoke with an emotionless tone, "Not lending a helping hand when you saw the cultivators of Black Rock City in trouble is the greatest mistake you have ever made. If you had escaped in time, it would have been fine, but you actually stayed behind to witness the entire incident. Naturally, I can't let you live." Tangjin acted as if he suddenly came to a realization when he heard this. He looked at Elder Emo and coldly laughed, "I see, I understand. After thinking about it, it makes sense. After all, Black Rock City has always been powerful. This time, they suffered a big loss and their image was greatly damaged. Naturally, they don't want to publicize this matter." Elder Emo, who was feeling pent-up anger, wanted to find someone to vent his anger on, "But I just had to dress like a wild cultivator and this is the wilderness, so I was the best choice, right?" Tangjin's voice was filled with killing intent as he spoke. He glanced at the cold-faced cultivators from Black Rock City and chuckled, "Since that's the case, Xinjin, let's see who's the real deal." Tangjin's voice had just fallen when he immediately took out a mini submachine gun and rapidly fired at Elder Emo. The cultivators from Blackstone City were stunned when they saw this. The rank 4 leader of the Blackstone City team shouted angrily. He raised his arm and threw a dart that was made from a spearhead at Tangjin. The dart went straight for his chest, but Tangjin easily dodged it. The rest of the Black Rock City's cultivators shouted in unison and rushed towards Tangjin. The young man by the name of Xiao Rui took a deep look at Tangjin before he brandished his long sword and rushed over. However, his figure was faintly at the back of the group. As the target of the attack, Elder Mo's expression changed as he faced the rapidly approaching bullets. His figure flashed at an extremely fast speed and crossed over the flying bullets. Following that, Elder Emo furiously roared. With a swing of his hand, he pulled out a long black whip from his waist and lashed it towards Tangjin. This long whip was over 5 meters in length. It brought about a sharp wind when it was swung. Tangjin did not doubt that this long whip made of an unknown material would be able to split an ordinary person's body into two. Tangjin, who had sensed the danger, immediately dodged. At the same time, he also avoided the cultivators from Blackstone City who had surrounded him. He took out a grenade, pulled the safety pin, and threw it towards the dense group of Blackstone cultivators. Seeing the metal lump that Tangjin had thrown, the surrounding Black Rock City cultivators were all stunned. They did not understand what Tangjin wanted to do with it. However, Elder Mo of Black Rock City was very knowledgeable. After seeing the grenade that Tangjin had thrown, a trace of doubt and contemplation flashed across his eyes. However, in the blink of an eye, his expression changed greatly and he shouted, "Get out of the way! That's a bomb!" Elder Mo's warning was still a step too late. The grenade had already exploded. For a moment, shrapnel flew everywhere. The shockwave was like an invisible sword, setting off a rain of blood among the cultivators of Black Rock City. After the explosion, the cultivators of Black Rock City were dumbfounded by the scene in front of them. They turned their heads around and glared at Tangjin as if they were going to swallow him alive. At the center of the explosion, 7 or 8 Black Rock City cultivators were lying on the ground covered in blood. 4 or 5 of them were clearly on the verge of death and could not be saved. The rest of the injured were also covered in wounds, and some of them were groaning in pain. These were their companions that they had spent a lot of time with, but in the blink of an eye, they were separated by life and death. A small grenade had actually made them pay such a heavy price. This made them angry, but at the same time, it also raised fear in their hearts towards Tangjin. After seeing this scene, the youth Xiao Rui immediately rejoiced that he had been on guard against Tangjin. This allowed him to avoid the killing range of the terrifying bomb. Otherwise, it would have been difficult for him to escape. Seeing such a tragic situation, Elder Mo immediately burst into anger and roared, "Little thief, I will kill you." After saying this, Elder Mo's figure was like lightning as he pounced towards Tangjin. From his speed, it was impossible for Tangjin to dodge. From the strength of his attack, it seemed like he was determined to kill Tangjin in a single strike. Tangjin surprisingly did not dodge. Instead, he faced the path of Elder Mo's attack. He raised his left arm and extended 2 fingers, making a gesture of pointing at Elder Mo. At the same time, he had a strange smile on his face. New chapters will be fully updated at novl/bin.com. At the same time, Tangjin had already activated the miniature deathlight weapon. Whoosh! A ray of light that represented death swiftly shot towards Elder Mo. From the angle of its shot, it seemed to have flashed from Tangjin's fingertip. Elder Mo suddenly felt the threat of death approaching him. Years of life and death battles had not only made his premonition of danger extremely sharp, but his escape movements were also honed to perfection. The moment he sensed the danger, Elder Mo had actually forcefully shifted his body halfway in an attempt to avoid the inexplicable danger. However, how could a human's speed be faster than the speed of a death ray weapon? When he sensed the danger, it was too late to dodge. Bang! Elder Mo let out a blood-curdling screech. His voice did not sound like a human's. It was a sound that would only be produced when one was in extreme pain. It was filled with fear and grief. When the cultivators of Black Rock City heard it, they looked over and were all shocked. One of the people with the highest cultivation in Black Rock City, Elder Mo, who was usually extremely dignified, was now half kneeling on the ground like a limp dead dog. Half of his right shoulder and the entire arm had disappeared without a trace, and the wound was also charred black. Looking at Elder Mo's trembling body and the beads of sweat that kept rolling down his head, one could tell how much pain he was in. The cultivators from Black Rock City were in disbelief. Even though Elder Mo was a man of poor character, his cultivation was at level 5. How could a level 4 rogue cultivator hurt Elder Mo? One of the Black Rock City cultivators suddenly recalled the scene of Tangjin pointing at Elder Mo before a ray of light struck Elder Mo. He could not help but shout out, "It's a divine spell. This wild cultivator must be a level 4 holy master." When the cultivators from Black Rock City heard the words Holy Master, they were all shocked. They looked at Tangjin with a hint of fear and even a hint of envy. They were naturally well-versed in the abilities of holy masters. They were the best of the best, and there was a holy master in Black Rock City. Although the holy master's cultivation was only at rank 2, he was an existence that could fight against a rank 3 cultivator and even kill him. Tang Jin's eyes and ears were sharp. When he heard that these Black Rock City cultivators had mistook his ability for a so-called divine technique, a thought appeared in his mind. However, it disappeared in the blink of an eye. Tang Jin did not forget to stare at the map while he was fighting against Elder Mo. At this moment, a mocking smile suddenly surfaced on his face. The leader of the level 4 cultivators from Black Rock City did not care whether Tang Jin was a holy master or not. Instead, he took the opportunity to pounce on Tang Jin from behind, intending to launch a sneak attack on him and kill him. Tang Jin faintly felt a trace of uneasiness as he glanced at Elder Mo, whose aura was so weak that it seemed like he would fall to the ground at any moment. Therefore, he did not choose to chase after the seemingly weak Elder Mo. Instead, he activated map teleportation and appeared behind the Black Rock City's leader who tried to sneak attack him in the blink of an eye. You plan to attack me from behind, so I'll let you have a taste of my blade. F0 Low New Hapters at NOV/EL/BIN/.com. The cultivators from Black Rock City had already stopped their attacks. Instead, they chose to watch the battle. In a battle between high-level cultivators like this, if they rushed forward, they would only be an obstacle to Tang Jin. It was no different from suicide. Moreover, Tang Jin might also be a holy master. This made them even more afraid to act rashly. Now that they saw Tang Jin suddenly disappear from his original spot and then mysteriously appear behind the leader of the cultivators from Black Rock City, other than being even more certain of Tang Jin's identity as a holy master, some people began to worry about the safety of the leader of the cultivators from Black Rock City. "Leader, be careful. He's behind you," a cultivator from Black Rock City warned loudly. However, it was already too late. Tang Jin's purple lightning short sword had already been thrust out and was heading straight for the heart. The leader of the cultivators in Black Rock City was shocked when he saw Tang Jin suddenly disappear. However, before the leader of the cultivators could figure out what was going on, he felt a prickling sensation on his back. The undisguised killing intent made his soul fly out of his body. He wanted to dodge, but it was too late. Pfft! The purple lightning short sword pierced through the cultivator leader's back and came out of his chest, not stained by a single drop of blood. The demonic armor on the cultivator leader was like paper in front of the sharp purple lightning short sword. From this, one could see how extraordinary the purple lightning short sword was. With a twist of his wrist, the purple electric short sword stirred in the chest of the leader of the cultivators. After completely crushing his heart, Tang Jin pulled it out. The body of the leader of the cultivators went limp on the ground. His face was full of unwillingness and pain. After struggling for a while, he no longer moved. When they saw how easily Tang Jin had killed and crippled 2 high-level cultivators, the remaining cultivators from Black Rock City felt a chill in their bones. Their fighting spirit completely disappeared and their legs began to tremble. Some of them had even begun to slowly retreat while secretly thinking about how they could safely escape from Tang Jin's pursuit. Tang Jin did not care about the low-level cultivators from Black Rock City who had been frightened by him. Instead, he turned his head to look at Elder Mo who was still half-kneeling on the ground. With a disdainful expression, he coldly snorted and said, "Elder Mo, how long are you going to keep pretending? Don't worry, even if I kill all these cultivators, I won't get close to you and let your sneak attack succeed. You cunning old fox." After Tang Jin ridiculed him, Elder Mo did not have any reaction. He then ignored him and turned to look at the low-level cultivators from Black Rock City. The cultivators from Black Rock City who met his gaze could not help but feel a chill in their hearts and their scalps go numb. When Tang Jin's eyes made contact with the young cultivator named Xiao Rui, he saw that the other party was also looking back at him with a profound expression. His eyes seemed to contain gratitude. At the same time, his gaze slowly shifted and landed on a slightly fat cultivator from Black Rock City who had a timid expression. A killing intent suddenly appeared in his eyes. Tang Jin smiled when he saw this. He also turned his gaze towards the slightly plump Class 2 cultivator from Black Rock City. Killing intent surged in his eyes. Without waiting for the other party to react, he suddenly raised his gun and pulled the trigger. Bang, bang, bang! 3 bullet holes immediately appeared on the cultivator's neck as he collapsed to the ground with an unreconciled expression. Ah Jin was killed by him. Everyone, retreat quickly. Don't make unnecessary sacrifices. I'll stop him. After the young man named Little Rui saw Tang Jin shoot and kill the cultivator, a trace of joy immediately flashed in his eyes. Then, his face revealed a look of panic. He stepped forward in front of the crowd and placed his sword across his chest. While blocking Tang Jin, he nodded slightly in thanks and used a warning look to signal Tang Jin to look behind him. In fact, there was no need for Xiao Rui to remind him. Tang Jin had already seen Elder Mo's devil-like eyes under his disheveled hair through the map. He was slowly standing up as though the pain of his broken arm did not exist. I have no interest in killing you weaklings. Before I change my mind, get out of my sight. Tang Jin coldly spoke to the young man, Xiao Rui. The other party was cooperative as he slowly retreated. After which, he led the group of cultivators from Black Rock City who were scared out of their wits and retreated far away. However, when he occasionally glanced at Elder Mo, his eyes would be filled with even more intense killing intent. When he recalled the conversation between Xiao Rui and his sister, how could Tang Jin not guess that the cultivator from Blackstone City whose head he had exploded and this Elder Mo were the culprits who caused the death of Xiao Rui's parents? They were irreconcilable enemies. Now that he had helped him to get rid of these 2 enemies, he must repay him in kind. Tang Jin even had some faint anticipation in his heart. After all, he had relied on the information provided by Xiao Rui the last time to empty the treasure room in Black Rock City. So what good things could he get this time? After the group of Black Rock City's cultivators retreated, Tang Jin turned around with a smile on his face. He looked at Elder Mo, who was standing among the wild grass. At this moment, his clothes were fluttering in the wind and his hair was in a mess. Coupled with his injuries, he looked like he was in his twilight years. Tang Jin sized him up. Only then did he smile in disdain. Elder Mo, why don't you continue with your act? Is it because of what I said just now, or is it because you've already released the power of your final attack and can only helplessly wait for death? Elder Mo seemed to be doing his best to suppress the pain in his heart. He used his eyes that had already become completely listless to look at Tang Jin and asked in a hoarse voice, I have yet to ask for your name. Even if I die in your hands, I must find out who I lost to. After glancing at Elder Mo, Tang Jin replied, Holy Dragon City Lord, Tang Jin. Full 0W current novels on n/o/v/3l/b in.co/m. Elder Mo was stunned for a moment before he broke into laughter. He shook his head and sighed, so you're the outsider who built the city in the small valley. No wonder you're a high-level cultivator and have mastered a divine technique. Isn't that the description of the Holy Dragon City's city lord in the intelligence report? Losing to a city lord isn't too embarrassing, this old man can die in peace, but I regret not making a move on you earlier and raising a tiger to cause trouble, ha ha ha. Elder Mo actually began to laugh loudly after saying that. However, after laughing twice, he began to cough violently. At the same time, a large amount of blood spurted out of his mouth, and some of the black carbon parts mixed in the blood came from his lungs. The power of the death ray weapon was terrifying. Although Elder Mo's torso was not directly hit, the terrifying heat of the death ray still burned most of the organs in his chest below the shoulder. He was only able to live until now because of his strong willpower. Even after suffering such a terrifying injury, Elder Mo still forcefully held on without saying a word. On the contrary, he appeared weak to the enemy and planned to ambush Tang Jin. Unfortunately, Tang Jin had seen through his scheme. Not only did he not fall for it, but he had also killed his grandson. With that, Elder Mo could no longer pretend. As cunning as a fox and as tough as a mountain, Tang Jin still gave some respect to such an enemy. He did not pull out his gun and directly kill him. When Tang Jin heard Elder Mo's words, he could not help but ask, "Could it be that your Black Rock City has already received news of me? And from your tone, it seems that you intend to make a move on me?" Elder Mo was still coughing non-stop, and his body was becoming more and more hunched. After coughing for half a minute, he raised his red face, opened his blood-covered mouth, and roared, "That's right, I'm going to kill you and I'll be responsible for it. It's a pity that I've underestimated you and didn't take you seriously. Now it seems that I've brought harm to Black Rock City. If I'm not wrong, you're the thief of the Black Rock City's treasure vault, aren't you? In addition, you've built a tower near Black Rock City, and today, you've killed a cultivator from Black Rock City. I'm certain that Black Rock City will regard you as a great enemy and will send out an elite cultivator team to massacre your holy dragon city to vent their anger." Tang Jin looked at Elder Mo's tottering body and shook his head. He ridiculed with an expressionless face, "You're wrong. To me, Black Rock City is just a place that can be destroyed with a little bit of effort. However, I still need it to attract the attention of the corpse race and the other towers. What's laughable is that in your hearts, you actually think that my holy dragon city is nothing but clay chickens and pottery dogs, a place that you can do as you please, or even massacre as you please. Who gave you the confidence? Now that you're about to die, I won't hide anything from you and let you die in peace. Do you see this bomb that killed your group of cultivators? My holy dragon city can have as many as we want." Tang Jin flipped his hand and took out a hand grenade for Elder Mo to take a look. After randomly shaking it a few times, he took out a submachine gun and shook it. He continued, "Holy Dragon City also has as many of these firearms that can fire continuously as we want. With these two deadly weapons, what right does your Black Rock City have to fight me?" Tang Jin looked at the incomparably ugly expression on Elder Mo's face. He coldly snorted and continued, "Do you want to know how I found out the location of the treasure vault in Black Rock City and why I coincidentally shot your grandson to death?" Elder Mo's body trembled. His bloodshot eyes glared at Tang Jin as he furiously roared, "Tell me, why?" Tang Jin looked at the pained expression on Elder Mo's face and slowly shook his head, "Don't worry, I'll never tell you. You can die with regret. You, shameless Ingluo." Elder Mo's body trembled violently when he heard this. His eyeballs almost popped out, but his eyes were still staring at Tang Jin with endless hatred. Fresh blood mixed with carbonized organ fragments spurted out from his mouth. Soon after, he laid down on his back in the wild grass. Tang Jin was only silent for a few seconds as he looked at Elder Mo, who had died with his eyes wide open in the wild grass. He then turned around and ran in the direction of the Holy Dragon City. When the cultivators from Black Rock City saw that Tang Jin had finally left, they finally dared to come forward and wrap up Elder Mo and the leaders' corpses. Then, under Xiao Rui's lead, they returned to Black Rock City with a dejected expression. T from N0/V/LBN/.co/M. These cultivators from Black Rock City were not very old. Ever since they were born, they had been instilled with the idea that Black Rock City was the overlord of this region by their elders. As a result, they looked down on the wild cultivators from the bottom of their hearts and thought that they were weak. As for ordinary wanderers, they were not even considered humans in their eyes. Even if they had the chance to come into contact with those ill-equipped and weather-beaten rogue cultivators, the cultivators of Black Rock City would still assume a high and mighty attitude. They would think that if they were to speak to these rogue cultivators, they would be giving them a great deal of face. After all, he was a cultivator from Black Rock City, and the Black Rock City behind him was the overlord of this area. However, since the appearance of the corpse race, Black Rock City had been on the losing end. In the end, they were even surrounded by the corpse race, like a beast trapped in a cage. They could only let out helpless roars, but the management of Black Rock City was helpless. As a result, rumors began to spread among the citizens of Black Rock City. They claimed that Black Rock City was an overlord, but in reality, they were nothing more than that. They were actually blocked by monsters at their homes and did not dare to go out. This was simply a great humiliation. It was also the negligence of the city lord and the other higher-ups, etc. No one knew where the rumors had started, but the residents were talking about it with great relish. However, they were all discussing it in private. Talking about it in public would be courting death. However, the more one heard, the more one understood. The cultivators with high status in Black Rock City were actually more concerned about the development of this matter than the ordinary residents. After all, this concerned their own interests. They could only obtain more benefits if Black Rock City was strong. However, Black Rock City's obvious disadvantage made these cultivators feel uneasy. Their previous condescending attitude was now slightly shaken, and they began to doubt whether Black Rock City could win this war. Tangjin had ruthlessly killed 2 high-level cultivators from Black Rock City in succession. One of them was a level 5 elder. This had completely shattered the fighting spirit of the Black Rock City cultivators. They began to doubt what they had heard in the past. Was Black Rock City really the overlord of this area? Why were they in such a sorry state when facing the Corpse Clan, and why were their high-level cultivators so vulnerable? Compared to the dejected cultivators from Black Rock City, there was only one person who did not feel the slightest bit of suspicion. Instead, he was extremely excited. This person was the young man, Xiao Rui. Tangjin had helped him to kill his 2 great enemies. It was as though a huge mountain had been removed from his heart, and he felt refreshed. Compared to the rumors that he had secretly spread and the small tricks that he had used to disturb the hearts of the people in Black Rock City, Tangjin's method of killing his enemies by clashing with them head-on was what a real man would do. It was also the scene that Xiao Rui yearned for the most. It was a pity that his cultivation level was not high enough. Otherwise, he would be the one to kill his enemy today. Xiao Rui was thinking as he walked. Suddenly, he started to feel worried. He had received a huge favor from Tangjin this time. He had to repay him. Otherwise, the deal between the 2 of them would definitely end. This was something that Xiao Rui would never allow to happen. After all, the powerful Tangjin would be a great help to him in realizing the plan in his heart. However, Tangjin was definitely not someone that could be easily dismissed. Did he have anything that could move his heart? Just as Xiao Rui was secretly thinking about what benefits he could give to Tangjin, a young cultivator from Blackstone City came over and said to Xiao Rui in a deep voice, "Xiao Rui, we didn't complete our mission this time, and so many people died. We'll definitely be punished when we go back. We're not afraid of physical pain, but we're afraid of implicating our families. Your cultivation is the highest among us, so you can make a decision. We'll all listen to you." Xiao Rui's eyes lit up when he heard this. He looked at the surrounding cultivators and asked, "What are you guys thinking? Are you all going to listen to my command after we go back?" "Of course, we'll listen to you." "I'll definitely listen to you." "Don't worry, Rui." All the cultivators replied at the same time, but their meaning was the same: they would listen to Xiao Rui's command. "Good. Since everyone trusts me so much, I will not disappoint you. However, the premise is that you must all listen to my command. Only then can I guarantee that everyone will be fine. Xiao Rui looked at the crowd and said with a calm and confident face. However, he was laughing wildly in his heart. The governor of Black Rock City, and those high and mighty old men, just you wait. We'll see how it goes. Xiao Rui was secretly ruthless, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. Tang Jin's speed was very fast. It did not take long for him to see the valley in the distance. At the same time, he could see the crowd that would occasionally flash in front of the valley. After taking a closer look, he realized that they were all wanderers. When Tang Jin arrived at the entrance of the valley, there were more than 10 warriors checking the wanderers one by one. Only those who met the standards were allowed to enter the valley to work. Tang Jin discovered that the people who were allowed to enter were young and strong men and women. As for the old, weak, sick, and disabled, they would find a place to rest on the gravel plain outside the valley. However, they were unwilling to leave this place. After seeing Tang Jin, the soldiers immediately saluted him. This naturally attracted the attention of the wanderers. However, when they found out that Tang Jin was the Holy Dragon City's city lord, all of them revealed expressions of respect and fear, and consciously kept their distance from Tang Jin. Tang Jin looked at these yellow-faced and emaciated wanderers and asked Old Mike, who was standing guard at the side, "Old Mike, what's with these wanderers?" Old Mike was currently smoking a cigarette that Qianlong had given him. After hearing Tang Jin's question, he immediately stepped forward and loudly said, "City Lord, these people came here by accident while hiding from the undead race. After they found out that we were recruiting people to work and paying them with food, they refused to leave." After speaking, Old Mike secretly observed Tang Jin's expression and probed, "City Lord, do you want me to drive them away now?" Tang Jin shook his head when he heard this. He pointed to the dozens of children who had gathered at the side and asked, "What's wrong with these little guys? Is no one taking care of them?" Old Mike gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "The parents of these children are dead, and the others can't even fill their stomachs. They don't have time to care about them, so these children live together. As for whether they live or die, it depends on luck." After saying this, Old Mike shook his head and said, "But I don't think they'll have many days left. After all, the undead and monsters are everywhere outside, and it's getting harder and harder to get food. I heard that many wanderers have been bitten to death and turned into the undead. The rest either starved to death or ran to other places to take refuge." Tang Jin glanced at the wanderers again and took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket. After lighting one for himself, he gave the rest to Old Mike. Old Mike was extremely happy. Under the envious eyes of the other warriors, he put the cigarette into his pocket with a smug expression. After Tang Jin finished smoking a cigarette, he said to Old Mike, "These wanderers are forced to stay here. In that case, I'll be a kind man for once. You can let these people work in the valley later. They'll only be provided with food and drink. You don't have to drive them out at night. They can just stay in the valley for the night. City Lord, you're a really good person. These wanderers are really lucky to have met you." When Old Mike heard this, he quickly flattered Tang Jin. However, Tang Jin gave him a kick and jokingly scolded him, "F***ck, your flattering is really asking for a beating." Old Mike smiled awkwardly. After rubbing his but that did not hurt, he continued to listen to Tang Jin's orders. As for those children who don't have parents, Qian can leave them behind and let someone take charge of their training. We'll take as many as we can. If Black Rock City can nurture cultivators from a young age, how can my Holy Dragon City be inferior to them? After Tang Jin finished speaking, he swept his eyes over those yellow-faced and emaciated orphans. His eyes were indifferent, yet there was no expression on his face. When he returned to the Holy Dragon City from the entrance of the valley, Qianlong, Tai Xing, and the others had already received the news and were waiting for him. Tang Jin had a simple chat with them before ordering them to leave. Qianlong and Tai Xing stayed behind and reported the recent training progress to Tang Jin. Although there weren't many official residents in Holy Dragon City, there were still 3 armed forces. However, this was only a prototype. In the future, when the Holy Dragon City gradually developed and grew stronger, these 3 armed forces would also grow stronger day by day. First of all, every tower city would have a cultivator battle team. At present, all the cultivators in the Holy Dragon City were only 9 teams, with a total of 45 people. The one with the highest cultivation was at level 2, and their weapons were mainly armor and swords. They were all working hard on their cultivation. The second group was the Ordinary Army, which was responsible for the defense of the building and the daily combat. There were a total of 100 soldiers. These people did not have any talent for cultivation. In the future, they would use firearms as their main weapon and swords as auxiliary weapons. At present, they had already begun to get used to and become familiar with the use of firearms. The third group was made up of pure operators of heavy weapons. They were in charge of operating the heavy machine guns, mortars, and other weapons that Tang Jin had brought. Currently, there were a total of 20 people and they had already started simple training. Tai Xing and Qianlong were extremely familiar with swords and sabers, but they only had a smattering of knowledge about firearms. When they were teaching others, they would often be stumped by a simple question. They scratched their ears and cheeks for a long time, but they couldn't recall Tang Jin's explanation and demonstration. Hence, the Holy Dragon City's soldiers' understanding of firearms and weapons was no different from gunblind. Tang Jin had already anticipated such a situation and knew that this matter couldn't be rushed. However, the foreign kobold race had to be eliminated as soon as possible. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble in the future. If they sensed that something was wrong and fled, they would become a formidable enemy of the Holy Dragon City when they returned in a few years. Tang Jin had thoroughly experienced the stinky and stubborn character of the dog-headed people this time. However, it was also because of this that Tang Jin could not let them off. Therefore, the plan to exterminate the kobolds could not be delayed. After fighting with the dog-headed people once, Tang Jin decided to kill them completely. Therefore, there wasn't a need for too many warriors to use swords. However, warriors who used guns were essential. This was because he planned to use heavy machine guns to deal with the dog-headed people in the hilly area. He ordered Tai Xing to pick 50 soldiers and at the same time, he asked Qianlong to bring over 10 members of the cultivator battle team. He told everyone to get ready and wait for him to return before immediately heading to the Houndhead men's nest. After the 2 of them left, Tang Jin activated the teleportation and appeared on a remote street in the Ice Bear Alliance. He had come back to look for Ivanov and ask him to get a few light vehicles that could carry heavy machine guns. It would be best if he could get a simple military transport vehicle that could transport a large number of soldiers. Tang Jin took out his phone from the space and called Ivanov. Read the latest stories novilbin.com. At this time, Ivanov was in the basement of his house, performing a rebirth ceremony for the first believer he had developed. The Leonide family was one of the most powerful families in the city. They had great power in many fields, and all this glory came from their legendary figure, an old man close to 70 years old, Old Leonard. Old Leonardo had been rolling around in piles of dead people since he was 15 years old. To be able to live steadily until now and build such a huge family business, he was definitely not a simple person. However, no matter how cunning and courageous old Leonardo was, he could not escape the cycle of life and death. Just a few days ago, he suddenly fainted and fell to the ground. Half a day after he was admitted to the hospital, he was told by the doctor that he would not live long. Although old Leonard had long seen through life and death, who would not miss life and face death calmly? Old Leonard, who wanted to live, entered Ivanov's sight. He decided that he would be the first believer and began to visit and persuade him. At this time, Ivanov had already labeled himself as the gatekeeper of the gods and had given his organization a name, Eternal Heaven. Ivanov had known old Leonard for a long time. Now that he had appeared, using himself as an example, and then using the foundation stone given by Tangjin and the strange soldier armor on Pars, he finally moved old Leonard. While old Leonid was shocked, he was also very eager to be reborn. He sincerely begged Ivanov to pray to the gods for him, so that he could get such a precious opportunity. Ivanov thought about it for a long time before reluctantly agreeing. However, the premise was that old Leonard had to join Eternal Heaven and become a believer of God. The next step was for old Leonid to ignore his family's concerns and suppress the voices of opposition. He then knelt in front of Ivanov and swore to join Eternal Heaven, becoming the first believer of the organization. Now that old Leonid had become one of his own, Ivanov began to prepare for the rebirth ceremony. At the same time, the members of the Leonid family also fully cooperated with Ivanov under the orders of the old man. For a time, the entire vicinity of the Ivanov family's house was filled with gunmen with live ammunition. Their expressions were solemn and cold, and they forbade any strangers from taking a step closer. In the basement of the Ivanov family's house, the High Guard of Pars, wearing the shining demonic armor, quietly guarded the altar. Natasha, who was wearing a white robe, knelt and prayed silently. Ivanov held the floating cornerstone in his hand and sat firmly on the bench, looking like a quack. The dozens of members of the Leonardo family knelt on the ground, staring at the body of the old man in the blood pool. Just an hour ago, the old man had undergone surgery and a brain bead had been implanted in his brain. At the same time, he had stopped breathing under the effect of the drug. In the blood pool at the other corner of the altar, there was the corpse of an extremely strong young man. There was a hole in his head, and he was floating in the blood pool. The body had been sent by the Leonid family, but Ivanov had no interest in knowing where it had come from. Looking at Ivanov in a long robe, the family members who were against it secretly held their breath. They were waiting for Ivanov to screw up, then they would cruelly kill him to vent their anger. From the beginning to the end, they all thought that Ivanov's so-called rebirth ceremony was a lie. Only old Leonid would be fooled by Ivanov. But they had forgotten one thing, and that was that old Leonard, who had read countless people and founded this family business at the same time, was not as simple and stupid as they had thought. At this time, all the preparation work had been completed. Natasha finished her prayer, stood up, and walked to the side. She looked forward expressionlessly, and her speech and behavior were like that of an otherworldly saint. Ivanov took a step forward and began to chant the incantation Tangjin had taught him. As he chanted, the altar began to glow faintly. A layer of blood-red halo dyed the entire basement and a mysterious aura emerged. The members of the Leonid family were also attracted by the scene, and they stared at Ivanov. "Be reborn, believers of God." Ivanov finished reciting the spell and suddenly shouted. At the same time, he gently patted a certain node on the altar. After the palm landed, the entire altar was surrounded by blood-red flames. After a few seconds, the blood-red flames slowly extinguished. After seeing this, everyone knew that the most crucial moment had arrived. In fact, not only were the members of the Leonid family nervous, but even Pargo, Natasha, and the guards had never seen a rebirth ceremony before, so they were also nervous. Under everyone's gaze, the blood pool that was soaking the young man's body suddenly shook, and then there were slight waves. Then, the blood-colored waves grew bigger and bigger, as if they were going to overflow outside. Just as everyone's hearts were in their throats, a crash sound was heard. The burly young man suddenly sat up in the blood pool, then slowly opened his eyes. Everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them, which was beyond common sense. Their eyes were full of doubt, fear, ecstasy, and shock. The burly young man seemed to be familiarizing himself with his body. He sat in the blood pool and moved his stiff body slightly before standing up naked. He took a bath towel from a junior of the Anide family and wrapped it around his body. Then, he strode to Ivanov. Looking at Ivanov, who was holding the foundation stone, the reborn old Leonide slowly knelt down, put his hand on his heart, and said in a pious tone, "Thank you, God, for giving me the chance to be reborn. I now feel that I am incomparably powerful. Please accept my most sincere thanks and swear to God that I will become his most loyal believer. I will be fearless even if I have to die." The people in the basement were unable to calm down. At first, they thought that the so-called rebirth ritual was just a joke. However, after witnessing the magical scene in front of them, everyone's worldview collapsed and they began to believe in the existence of gods. The truth was right in front of their eyes, and there was no way to refute it. The young man's body had been brought here by them personally. It was definitely a dead body. Old Leonardo had also died under their watchful eyes. This could not be faked. However, one of the two lifeless bodies really came back to life after a mysterious rebirth ceremony. Regardless of whether it was old Leonard or not, the fact that this ritual could resurrect a corpse was shocking enough. Moreover, other than his physical appearance, the young man's voice, tone, habits, and the aura he exuded were exactly the same as the old Leonard that the younger generation was familiar with. When everyone saw this, they no longer had any doubts. Old Leonardo had really been reborn and gained a younger and stronger body. Everyone's heart burned with passion as they thought of this. At the same time, they began to pray that one day, they would also be reborn after death. This kind of temptation was far different from wealth and power. It was something that even if you had all the material enjoyment in the world, you still couldn't ask for it. But at this moment, in this basement, in the organization of Eternal Heaven, they saw hope. How could they not be excited? How could they not yearn for it? Ivanov sat quietly in his chair, enjoying the respect and admiration of all the members of the Leonide family. He could see the flattery in their eyes, as well as the deep respect. The feeling was so wonderful that Ivanov had never enjoyed such treatment before, and he was intoxicated. Beside him, Par suppressed the shock in his heart and tried to maintain his dignity as the leader of the guards. But at this moment, a slight vibration came from his pocket. Pargo knew that it was Ivanov's phone, which he usually never left. This time, it was only for the sake of hosting the rebirth ceremony, so he temporarily kept it with him. Slowly walking to Ivanov, Pargo whispered a few words and then handed the phone to Ivanov. Ivanov immediately stood up when he saw that it was a call from Tangjin. Ivanov did not dare to show the slightest disrespect to the oracle, Tangjin. He immediately picked up the phone and after chatting for a while, both parties agreed on a place to meet. After hanging up the phone, Ivanov said to Pargo, "The divine messenger is about to arrive. Go and make preparations immediately. Up-to-date OVLS on OVL-bin.cm." Pargo immediately nodded and left the basement to make preparations. For someone who had come into contact with Tangjin before, this young man from the Asian Alliance had become more and more mysterious and unattainable. After Pargo left, Ivanov looked at the old Leonide standing in front of him and smiled. "You are very lucky, our Lord Oracle is coming soon. He has met God and has been appointed as the spokesperson of God. As the first believer of Eternal Heaven, I can bring you to see the Lord Oracle." After old Leonardo heard this, he immediately looked excited. After experiencing such a miraculous thing as rebirth, old Leonardo had long believed in the existence of God. Now that he had the chance to meet the real oracle, how could he not be excited? Half an hour later, Tangjin arrived at Ivanov's residence. After activating the quantum stealth light curtain, he did not attract the attention of any guardsmen at all and easily entered the interior of the residence. At this time, in the courtyard outside, Ivanov and Natasha stood at the front. The senior guard, Pars, guarded the side. The members of the Leonide family respectfully accompanied them, quietly waiting for Tangjin's arrival. By a rough estimate, there were no less than 50 people. Tangjin did not expect Ivanov to make such a big scene. He smiled helplessly and turned off the quantum stealth light screen. Then, he appeared out of thin air in front of everyone. Everyone was stunned when they saw Tangjin suddenly appear. The Leonide family members could not figure out who Tangjin was and why he had suddenly appeared. However, they instantly realized that this young man with a gentle smile was probably the Oracle. At the thought of this, everyone immediately began to exclaim in their hearts. This Sir Oracle was indeed powerful. He actually had such a magical method. He was truly worthy of being the spokesperson of God. After seeing Tangjin, Ivanov immediately bowed and saluted. At the same time, he said in the most respectful voice, "Welcome, Lord Oracle." Natasha and Bal also bowed to Anjali. Old Leonide bowed to Anjali, and so did his family members. No need to be so polite. Everyone, please leave. Ivanov, I'll wait for you upstairs. Tangjin waved his hand and smiled at the crowd before speaking to Ivanov. After saying this, Tangjin activated the map teleportation function and his figure once again disappeared in a strange manner. Before everyone could recover, Tangjin's voice had already sounded from the second-floor balcony 30 meters behind him. "Oh right, remember to prepare a batch of hard liquor for me. I'll take it with me later." Everyone looked over in the direction of the voice, only to see Tangjin slowly turning around and walking toward the room on the second floor from the balcony. A few people from the Leonide family quietly swallowed their saliva and looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with fanaticism. The magical means that Tangjin had displayed had completely convinced them because this was not an ability that humans could possess. At the same time, some people were roaring in their hearts, "Oh my God, it seems that gods really exist. I don't care anymore. No matter what price I have to pay, I want to join eternal heaven." Ivanov looked at Tangjin's back with longing and envy. Then, he pulled old Leonide, whose face was already fanatical, and quickly walked to the second floor. Natasha glanced at the balcony on the second floor with a complicated look, but her face was still expressionless, like an ice goddess. The senior guard of Pars guarded the entrance to the second floor. Ivanov brought old Leonide to Tangjin. After getting Tangjin's permission, he slowly sat down on the sofa opposite. Ivanov first introduced old Leonide and said that old Leonide's faith was very devout and firm, which attracted a grateful look from old Leonide. Tangjin nodded with a smile and spoke a few words with old Leonardo. He then waved his hand and a few cards with different designs appeared on the table. These cards were all special prizes that Tangjin had accumulated from using the Fortune Wheel's basic lottery draw in his free time. He had invested a lot of his brain into it, but did not obtain much in return. This made Tangjin, who had always felt that his brain was not enough, very depressed. After seeing Tangjin pull out a few cards out of thin air, Ivanov and the other man looked at each other, but they couldn't understand the meaning behind Tangjin's actions. Tangjin explained to the two of them upon seeing this, "There are 4 cards here. They are treasures made with divine power. These 2 white cards can form a shield when you are in danger, and it can last for about 5 seconds. The other 2 green cards can put you in a stealth state, and it can last for 10 minutes. Tangjin looked at the envious faces of Ivanov and old Leonard and distributed the cards to them. He then smiled and said, "This is a gift for the 2 of you. God is never stingy with his devout believers." When the 2 of them heard that the card was a treasure given to them, they immediately shed tears of gratitude and thanked the God for his grace. At the same time, they kept the card close to their bodies with pious expressions. Looking at the two people who were carefully holding the cards, Tang Jin could not help but secretly laugh in his heart. The cards he had given out were things that he could not use. Compared to the Black Cloak and the Quantum Stealth Light Curtain with amazing defensive power, this kind of one-time use card was of little value to him. At this time, it was just the right time to give them out to win people's hearts. The things that he did not care about were treated like treasures by Ivanov and the other man. It was not a waste of the brain that he had spent. After the card was sent out, it was time for serious business. Tang Jin directly said that he needed a few light off-road vehicles. At the same time, he also needed a military transport vehicle that could carry a large number of people. After listening to Tang Jin's request, old Leonide, who was sitting on the side, immediately patted his chest and said that there was no problem. He also explained that his family had several large car repair centers. Even if he couldn't find the finished car Tang Jin needed on the market, he could immediately modify it according to his requirements. As for the performance and operation, there would definitely be no problems. Tang Jin nodded his head in satisfaction when he heard this. This was the scene that he had hoped to see the most. Once his forces in the original world developed, he would no longer need to do everything himself like before. Instead, with a single order, a group of rich and powerful subordinates would take care of it for him. This way, Tang Jin could concentrate on developing the forces in the world of Luqing. If he wanted the horse to run, he had to let the horse eat its fill. Tang Jin naturally understood this principle. Therefore, he did not intend to take the benefits of the two people for free. Even if he gave the two people a chance to be reborn and gave them magical cards, he still needed to use the benefits to firmly lock the two people on his chariot. After thinking up to this point, Tang Jin waved his hand again and a gorgeous box appeared in front of Ivanov and the other man. This was the treasure chest that Tang Jin had obtained from the Tree Spirit tribe. The green leaf books inside had already been properly kept by him. The remaining chest took up some space in the space, so he used it to store the various gemstones he had obtained from the roots of the mother tree. Ivanov and the other man were no longer surprised when they saw another item in front of them. However, when they saw that the box was filled with gorgeous gemstones, they still felt their hearts beat faster. To be able to move the hearts of these two guys who didn't lack money, it was completely because these gemstones were too beautiful. The mother tree's magic lay in the gemstones it gathered. None of them were of ordinary quality. Almost every single one of them was flawless, of the best quality. They looked so fake, but they were real. Even with Ivanov and old Leonard's experience and knowledge, they had never seen such a beautiful top-grade gem. Looking at the box of top-grade gemstones in front of them, even if the two old men were men, they still had the urge to embrace all of them and carefully examine them. If a woman saw this, she would probably go crazy. "Sir Oracle, what are you doing?" Ivanov asked Tang Jin after hesitating for a moment as he retracted his gaze from the gem box with great difficulty. "Sell these gemstones, and you'll keep the money earned. You can use it for daily activities and purchases because in the future, I'll need a lot of materials and weapons. I can't do it without money." After Tang Jin explained, he glanced at the two of them who seemed to be deep in thought. He smiled and asked, "Aren't you guys curious why I'm getting these supplies and weapons? Forgive me for being presumptuous, but I really want to know." Geht the Testfels on no/v/elben.c/om. Ivanov hesitated for a moment before deciding to tell the truth. This was because he knew that he could not hide his thoughts from Tang Jin, who had extremely sharp five senses. Therefore, he might as well tell the truth. This way, it would appear that he had a magnanimous heart. Tang Jin nodded when he heard this. He then looked at old Leonide and laughed when he saw that he had the same expression. "Then you guys have to be careful. Don't get scared. Tang Jin waved his hand once again after he finished speaking. Immediately after, the corpse of an incomparably ferocious and terrifying monster that was over 2 meters tall appeared on the ground. It even emitted a muffled sound when it landed. This was the monster corpse that Tang Jin had deliberately left behind during the previous monster attack. He had prepared it for research. At the same time, there was also a large amount of monster muscles that he had accumulated. These things took up a lot of space in the space, so Tang Jin planned to get Ivanov to make a cold storage to freeze them. Looking at the ferocious monster that appeared out of thin air, Ivanov and the other man were shocked. They stood up at the same time and wanted to escape. However, when they saw Tang Jin, who was sitting as steady as a mountain, and found that the monster's body had been pierced by a sharp blade, they sat back in their original positions with embarrassment. At the same time, they kept sizing up the monster with curious eyes. After the two of them watched for a while, Tang Jin finally opened his mouth and explained, "The reason why I need a large amount of resources and weapons is because the gods plan to conquer an unknown world. That world is rich in resources and countless rare treasures. I don't know how large the area is, but from what I know, some powerful forces have castles that are as large as a continent. I'm currently fighting for the gods, and this is only the beginning, so I need a lot of resources and weapons to arm my native army in the other world. Do you understand now?" Ivanov and the other man were dumbfounded. It turned out that in addition to the original world they were in, there was another extremely vast foreign world, and the noble oracle was now fighting for the gods. This was true glory. Just thinking about it made him extremely excited. The two of them felt their blood boiling. They wished that they could immediately head to the other world that Tang Jin had mentioned. They wished that they could wear armor and wield swords to fight for the gods and achieve countless merits. Tang Jin smiled and waved his hand as he looked at Ivanov and the other man, who were burning with battle intent. He then slowly said, "You don't have to be so excited, because that world is too dangerous and not suitable for you to go." The monster in front of him seemed powerful, but in that world, it was just an ordinary soldier. A truly powerful monster could easily destroy a city. So all you need to do is to develop believers in your original world and do the logistics for me. This is also a contribution to the gods, and the gods will not forget your hard work. I believe that with your support, it won't take long for us to conquer a large territory in the other world. At that time, I'll think of a way to let you go to the other world once and experience the local customs." Tang Jin's explanation caused the hot blood in the hearts of the two to gradually cool down. After all, they were not suited to fight and kill each other. The two of them were more suited for those schemes behind the scenes. However, they were even more confident in the strength of a god. His heart was filled with anticipation for his future journey to the other world. After that, Tang Jin asked Ivanov to find a cold storage room and take out the monster meat from his storage space to freeze it. He also ordered people to strictly guard it and not allow outsiders to come into contact with it. After that, Tang Jin got his men to record some videos of the operation of the weapons and copied them into a few tablets. He was going to hand them over to Tai Sing, Qianlong, and the others so that they wouldn't be caught off guard during their training. Immediately after, Tang Jin ran to the supermarket to make some purchases. Some of the items were for Holy Dragon City's use, while some were prepared to be placed on the Cornerstone trading platform to test the waters and earn points. Fortunately, he didn't have to fight alone this time. No matter where Tang Jin went, there would be at least 5 strong men from the Ice Bear Alliance following behind him. They would listen to his command. If Tang Jin wanted something, he only needed to give an order, and someone would start to purchase and pack it up. After walking around the city and looking at the list of purchased materials, Tang Jin was even a little worried that the Holy Dragon City's warehouse area was not enough. Just as Tang Jin was planning to finish his shopping and return to the Ivanov family's house to rest, he suddenly noticed a very familiar figure across the street. After taking a closer look, he realized that that person was actually his best friend, Su Feng. However, compared to the high-spirited Su Feng from before, the current Su Feng had a weather-beaten face. His clothes were in a mess, and he looked very down and out as he squatted by the roadside and smoked. Tang Jin was startled in his heart. The two of them had not met for a short period of time. How did Su Feng end up in such a miserable state? The cold wind blew, bringing up yellow leaves on the ground. The silver bangs on Su Feng's forehead were messed up by the wind, revealing his slightly depressed eyes. The rising smoke filled the air, but it made him cough twice. Tang Jin stopped the bodyguard behind him and slowly walked to the opposite side. He squatted beside Su Feng and lit a cigarette. Su Feng turned his head and took a glance at Tang Jin. His eyes were filled with surprise, but he didn't say anything. He just snatched the cigarette from Tang Jin's hand, lit another one, and started smoking. Tang Jin inhaled a deep breath of smoke and exhaled. He turned his head and looked at Su Feng. "What's wrong with you, kid? Did you cause someone else's wife to be hunted down, and then you ran here?" Su Feng, who was smoking, choked when he heard this. After coughing twice, he looked at Tang Jin and said with a bitter smile, "Don't mock me, I, Su Feng, am not that useless. I didn't expect to meet you here. Some time ago, you bought guns and made explosives, and then disappeared mysteriously. I'm very curious about you. Can you tell me what you're doing? Don't be embarrassed. If it's not convenient for you, it's fine if you don't tell me." Su Feng deliberately changed the topic as he looked at Tang Jin with a gossipy expression. "What's so hard to say? But this isn't the place to talk. Let's go to the restaurant opposite and talk while we eat." Tang Jin stood up and patted Su Feng. After which, the two of them stood up and crossed the street. They entered the restaurant opposite. Upon seeing this, the 5 bodyguards also followed. After Su Feng noticed this, he couldn't help but feel amazed. To be able to speak in the Ice Bear Alliance's language proficiently and have 5 bodyguards who didn't look like good people, his brother seemed to be doing well. There was a saying that the wheel of fortune turns. The contrast between his current embarrassing situation and Tang Jin's glory was the most vivid interpretation of this sentence. After the two of them sat down in the dining room, they casually ordered a few dishes. Only then did Tang Jin look at Su Feng and asked in a solemn tone, "Now you should at least tell me what happened. Let me remind you, don't try to change the topic. If there's anything, just tell me. If there's any difficulty, we'll shoulder it together as brothers." After Tang Jin said this, he stared unblinkingly at Su Feng. He stared until the originally frivolous Su Feng turned his head away. Only then did he pick up a glass of fruit juice and take a sip. Su Feng turned his head and let out a long breath. He softly laughed and said to Tang Jin, "Brother, I'm done for. Someone wanted to mess with me and used all sorts of methods. The other party was too powerful and I couldn't win. I had nowhere to go to the Asian Alliance, so I ran to the Ice Bear Alliance. My original plan was to just eat here and wait for death. After all, I'm just a brother, it doesn't matter where I'm buried. Do you know that the one who betrayed me was my most trusted brother? He sold me out completely. I even helped his brother build a house and get a wife, and helped his sister go to college. In the end, this is how he repays me." Su Feng gritted his teeth and growled. He clenched his fist tightly, making a caw-caw sound. The glass cup in his hand suddenly shattered, and the glass shards pierced his hand, causing it to bleed. However, he still refused to let go. Tang Jin sighed in his heart. He walked forward and pried Su Feng's hand away. He took out an IV ointment from his spatial ring and applied it on Su Feng's wound after cleaning it. The cool and numbing feeling from the wound finally made Su Feng's mood stabilize a little. He looked at the wound on his hand that was rapidly healing and let out a surprised sound. He raised his head and looked at Tang Jin, but did not say anything. Tang Jin lit up a cigarette and took a puff. He looked at Su Feng and said, "I already know what happened. We can't let that ungrateful bastard live happily. Feng Zi, let me ask you, do you want to take revenge?" Find PT Tez on n/VLN.cm. Shufeng didn't reply, but from his struggling expression, he seemed to be hesitating about something. The restaurant waiter at the side wanted to go forward and remind Tang Jin that smoking was not allowed here. However, after seeing the 5 bodyguards with killing intent, he very wisely pretended not to see it. In any case, they were the only customers in the restaurant. If he wanted to smoke, he could. If he angered the guards, he would be fired by the boss the next day. He would also be beaten up because the owner of the restaurant had a connection with the Leonide family. Su Feng struggled for a moment before he raised his head and looked at Tang Jin. He used a somewhat hoarse voice and asked, "Tang Jin, give me a definite answer. How much can you help me? Can you help me with money or help me with effort?" Tang Jin laughed softly when he heard this. He leaned forward and patted Su Feng's shoulder before returning to his original seat and said, "As long as you say the word, I have money and people. But before that, I want you to come with me to see someone. Compared to revenge, which is a trivial matter, what I want you to do is enough to make you a real man." After saying these words, Tang Jin began to quietly wait for Su Feng's choice. This was also an opportunity he was giving his brother. If they were fated, they would fight the world side by side. If they were not, wealth and peace would not meet. The path that Tang Jin wanted to take was destined to be filled with the glints of blades and the gory killing. The life and pursuit of an ordinary person were destined to be further and further away from him. If they wanted to continue being together, they would definitely have to enter his circle. If Su Feng had chosen another path, perhaps the entire original world would have been under Tang Jin's control a few years later. However, when they met again at that time, it would be a completely different mood and scene. Even if they were once good brothers, they would definitely not be able to return to the kind of interaction they had in the past. Tang Jin quietly looked at Su Feng. However, there were a myriad of thoughts in his heart. A few minutes later, Su Feng raised his head and looked at Tang Jin. He revealed a smile and said, "You're the only brother I can trust right now. If I don't follow you, who else can I follow? But let's make it clear in advance, I will never touch those dogskin deals." Tang Jin looked at Su Feng and nodded. He softly said, "Don't worry, I'll never cheat you. Let's eat first, then I'll take you to see that person." The following matters became very simple. Tang Jin first brought Su Feng to see Ivanov and let Su Feng understand the information about eternal heaven. After Su Feng completely believed Ivanov's explanation, Tang Jin appeared again. Then, to Su Feng's extreme shock, Tang Jin appointed Su Feng as the gatekeeper of the Asian Alliance, responsible for developing the followers of the Asian Alliance. However, at this time, Su Feng was penniless, so Ivanov provided him with 10 million for his activities. Old Leonard sent 20 strong men from the Ice Bear Alliance to be Su Feng's initial helpers. He would only return to the Ice Bear Alliance after he returned to the Asian Alliance and gained a firm foothold. The next morning, Tang Jin personally sent Su Feng to the car. He would be sneaking back to the Asian Alliance at the border with his 20 helpers. However, they would be going to the Asian Alliance under legal identities. After sending off Su Feng, Tang Jin returned to the warehouse provided by Old Leonard and started moving the materials again and again. Because he had purchased too many materials this time, it took him a long time to finish moving them. The mountain cave behind the Holy Dragon City was already filled to the brim. When Tangjin saw this, he had no choice but to order his men to continue digging the mountain cave. Fortunately, this mountain peak was extremely huge, so he did not have to worry about digging through it. The off-road vehicle that Tangjin needed had already been produced under old Leonid's orders. The body was welded with steel pipes and steel plates. It was powerful, simple, and durable. It was filled with a strong wasteland style. At the same time, the military transport vehicles that were used to transport the soldiers had also been produced. They were a type of multi-wheeled flat carriage that could be disassembled and assembled. They could be driven by motor vehicles, and each vehicle could carry 50 soldiers. Due to Tangjin's special instructions, these vehicles could be stored in the storage space. Therefore, they were transported by Tangjin and placed on the huge arena in front of the Holy Dragon City for Tai Seng and the others to use. Looking at the light off-road vehicle with the heavy machine guns fixed, Tai Seng was the first to jump onto it and started fiddling with it excitedly. Qian Long, on the other hand, directed a group of men to assemble the military transport vehicle. The open flat carriage was filled with rows of metal seats, and there were guardrails on the sides, allowing one to climb up and jump down easily. The vehicle in front that was in charge of pulling was also a modified vehicle. It looked short and unremarkable, but its power was strong. Even pulling up 20 tons of cargo was extremely easy. Not to mention that even if this military transport vehicle was filled with soldiers, its weight would not even reach 10 tons. The transportation was already in place, and the Holy Dragon City's combatants were also ready. They only needed to wait for the next morning to charge towards the Hound Head men's lair. After Tangjin saw that there was nothing for him to do here, he turned around and headed to the back mountain cave. He took out the various materials that he had prepared to sell on the Cornerstone trading platform and put a price on them one by one. Tangjin only turned around and left in satisfaction after the entire house was filled with all kinds of supplies. He would come back to check again after this busy period of time to determine exactly what kind of goods had a market in the other world. After Tangjin had some free time, he returned to his room and sat on a comfortable large chair. He took out a book with green leaves from the space and began to slowly read it. The green leaf books left behind by the tree spirit race were rich in content, and Tangjin would often be inspired when he read them. The more he understood the tree spirit clan, the more Tangjin admired the strength of the mother tree. If he could make good use of the mother tree's power, he would definitely bring the Holy Dragon City's strength to another level. The books he was reading now were about the cultivation of the mother tree. Unlike ordinary luching, the luching built by the mother tree was alive. If the cultivation method was not right, it could even lead to the death of the mother tree, and then the luching would no longer exist. According to the Tree Spirit Tribe's experience, there were two ways to cultivate a mother tree. The first was the method used by the Tree Spirit Tribe. They watered the mother tree with a spring water called Moon Spring, then prayed in the morning and evening to communicate with the mother tree. The mother tree cultivated in this way would emit the natural aura that the Tree Spirit Tribe liked, making the Tree Spirit Tribe members who lived on the mother tree feel like they were bathing in the spring wind at all times. Other than that, there was another way to cultivate a mother tree, which was to water it with blood, use the corpses of monsters as fertilizer, and then pray in the morning and evening. The mother tree that was cultivated in this way would give the Tree Spirit Tribe a sense of oppression, making it impossible for them to live normally under the mother tree. Therefore, this cultivation method had never been used by the Tree Spirit Tribe. Furthermore, the mother tree that was cultivated through different methods would possess completely different powers. One was natural and peaceful, while the other was violent and explosive. Tangjin didn't care about the so-called sense of oppression that the Tree Spirit clansmen spoke of. He only knew that the second method was the most suitable for him. This was because there was no lack of monster flesh and blood in the endless wilderness. If necessary, Tangjin didn't mind clearing up the monsters nearby to gather enough fertilizer for the mother tree. After thinking of this, Tangjin put down the green leaf book in his hand and slowly walked to the roof. He was looking for a suitable place for the mother tree that he was about to cultivate. In the end, his gaze stopped at a corner of the valley. After observing it for a long time, he nodded with satisfaction. Find updates on n/v/elben.co/m. Early the next morning, all the people who participated in the battle had already gathered. Tangjin sat in a light off-road vehicle equipped with a heavy machine gun. Under the gaze of the Holy Dragon City residents and the wanderers who participated in the construction, he waved his hand and ordered them to set off. The roar of the engine reverberated in the valley as the convoy rushed out of the valley in succession. Because the vehicles brought by Tangjin were easy to operate, the soldiers who already had a little driving experience were able to operate them very easily. 5 light off-road vehicles cleared the way, followed by a military transport vehicle. The vehicle was filled with fully armed Holy Dragon City soldiers. They crushed the scattered grass on the gravel plain, looking very imposing. From time to time, monsters would suddenly appear along the way. Every time this happened, there would be the crisp sound of gunfire. It was the Holy Dragon City cultivators who had just taken on the role of machine gunners. Relying on their strong reaction speed and control of their bodies, these cultivators who had only been using heavy machine guns for a few days were able to shoot accurately and tear the monsters into pieces of different sizes. The terrifying destructive power of these firearms left everyone speechless. Looking at the monster that seemed to be unable to withstand a single blow from the heavy machine gun, the soldiers on the transport vehicles all looked at the machine gunner with envious eyes, hoping to replace him with themselves. The sound of the vehicle's roar could travel extremely far in the wilderness. Therefore, before Tangjin's group had even approached the Houndhead men's nest, they had already alerted the Houndhead men. At this moment, they had already started to gather while shouting and wrangling. They were prepared to resist the enemies that might appear. Ever since Tangjin had caused a ruckus at the sacrificial ceremony of the Dog-Headed People's Tower and sent hundreds of dog-headed warriors after him away, the dog-headed people had always been vigilant, afraid that Tangjin would cause another ruckus. Because the city-building brain pearl had been stolen by Tangjin, the dog-headed clan leader had no choice but to send his subordinates back to his family and borrow some brain pearls and experts from his father for emergency use. However, every time he recalled the strange words his brothers had said to mock him for his incompetence, it would make the dog-headed clan leader fly into a rage. This also made it hate Tangjin to death in its heart, and it was eager to swallow his flesh and blood. A sentry had just reported that there was a strange sound in the distance, as if something was approaching. This alarm made the Kobold Patriarch's heart skip a beat. He had a vague premonition that it was likely to be the same bastard from last time. I've already hired an expert to deal with you. Since you're here, don't think of escaping so easily. The dog-headed patriarch gritted his teeth and thought hatefully in his heart. The rumbling sounds from the distance grew louder and louder. Soon, the Kobold Patriarch saw the situation of the people who had come. They were indeed the damned humans. However, they were all sitting in strange vehicles, and all of them were fully armed. They were obviously here to start a war. The dog-headed people were fearless. They would cruelly kill their enemies and devour their flesh and blood. Warriors of the Kobold clan, the enemy has arrived. We will never allow them to do as they please here, especially when the enemy is a lowly human. Now, raise your spears and fight with me. The leader of the dog-headed people let out a roar, which was immediately followed by countless dog-headed people's responses. Their roars shook the sky. They waved the short spears in their hands and bared their teeth. They stared at the group of humans in front of them with fierce eyes. Imagining the scene of them devouring their flesh and blood after victory, they couldn't help but drool. Tangjin, who was on the opposite side, coldly looked at the group of dog-headed people. A disdainful smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. When the distance between the two sides was less than 200 meters, Tang Jin informed them to stop the car. Soon after, the muzzles of 5 heavy machine guns were already aimed at the gathered dog-headed people. The soldiers quickly jumped down from the transport carriages and got into their positions according to their usual training. Everyone unsheathed their swords and waited for the order to charge. Without any nonsense, Tang Jin directly gave the order to shoot. Da-da 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 da-da. The roar of the heavy machine gun suddenly sounded like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, beginning to harvest the flesh and blood of the living. The kobolds on the opposite side immediately fell to the ground in droves like rice being blown away by the wind. Blood and flesh splattered everywhere. The power of the heavy machine gun was displayed perfectly at this moment. In the face of the fatal high-speed bullets, the dog-headed man's body was continuously torn apart, and he fell to the ground with a miserable cry. All of the kobolds were stunned by this highly efficient killing method. They were caught off guard as they watched their comrades fall to the ground and die in large numbers. They wanted to charge forward and save them, but they had no chance because the bullets would tear their bodies apart in the next second. The guards of the Kobold Patriarch roared and formed a defensive wall with their bodies, blocking the bullets that were shot at the Kobold Patriarch. Before they died, they roared loudly, asking their companions to protect the Kobold Patriarch and evacuate. The Kobold chieftain almost vomited blood. It watched as its own people were killed. The warriors organized a few charges, but they only managed to charge out a dozen meters before falling to the ground. In the blink of an eye, more than half of his clansmen had fallen. The rest were not any better, as they had almost been scared out of their wits. Retreat! Retreat! The Kobold Patriarch's heart was bleeding, but he had no choice but to give the order to retreat. If he continued to hesitate, his entire clan would really be exterminated. Human race, I can't live under the same sky as you. From now on, if I see any human again, I'll definitely capture them and skin them alive to vent the hatred in my heart. The Kobold chieftain, who was being protected by his guards, made a death vow in his heart. It was a pity that the Kobold Patriarch didn't know that Tang Jin didn't plan to let a single kobold leave today. Moreover, he was the core figure of the Kobold clan. Even if he chased him to the end of the world, Tang Jin would never let him go. Seeing that the dog-headed people began to flee in all directions under the orders of the clan leader, Tang Jin immediately signaled the 5 off-road vehicles to split up and give chase. At the same time, he ordered the soldiers behind him to charge. Kill! The 50 Holy Dragon City soldiers, who had been impatient for a long time, immediately shouted. They were like arrows that left the bow as they pounced on the kobolds. As if they were chopping melons and vegetables, they cut down the frantically running kobolds. At the same time, there were also warriors who kept taking out grenades from their waists, removing the safeties and throwing them at the kobolds in the distance. Explosions sounded one after another, and countless tattered kobold corpses were scattered on the ground under the impact of the air currents and shrapnel. In the blink of an eye, dozens of kobolds had lost their lives. Before the Hound Head men could recover from the deafening explosion, Tyson and the others pulled the trigger again. The metal torrent from the heavy machine guns started to wreak havoc again. Even though their shooting accuracy was very low, many Hound Head men still fell to the ground. The Hound Head men who were lucky enough to survive felt sad when they saw this. Tang Jin did not participate in the killing. Instead, he coldly observed the situation of the dog-headed people. Very quickly, his eyes focused. This was because he had discovered an extraordinary dog-headed person on the chaotic battlefield. This fellow's appearance was completely different from an ordinary Hound-Head man. It was wearing a very gorgeous robe and a purple headband on its thin head. In its dry hands, it held a cane made of an unknown material. Spots of red light were emitted from the surface of the cane. A word immediately appeared in Tang Jin's mind when he saw the dog-headed man's appearance and attire. That was a holy master. Tang Jin's heart trembled when he thought that the dog-headed man was likely to be a holy master. He told himself that he had to get rid of this guy first. Although Tang Jin had never met a real holy master, nor had he seen the so-called divine art, he had a preliminary guess about the possible form of the divine art after the cultivators of Black Rock City mistook his ability for divine art. Judging from the dog-headed man's aura, he should be a grade 1 cultivator, or a grade 1 holy master. Due to his fear of the divine art, Tang Jin did not rashly choose to engage in close combat even though the other party's cultivation was very low. Instead, he decided to snipe. Tang Jin quickly took out a large-caliber sniper rifle from his storage space and lay down on the ground. He placed the dog-headed holy master in the scope's field of vision and waited for the super shooting assistant to lock onto the target before he decisively pulled the trigger. The moment Tang Jin's bullet shot out, the dog-headed shaman looked in his direction as if he had come to a realization. Immediately after, a thin film that looked like a ripple appeared in front of the dog-headed shaman, protecting him like a barrier. Tang Jin watched with his eyes wide open as the powerful sniper rifle bullet was blocked by the thin film-like barrier. After which, it mysteriously disappeared, as though it had melted. How is this possible? Tang Jin was extremely shocked in his heart. An armor-piercing bullet that could easily penetrate a steel plate was actually unable to penetrate the thin layer of water at this moment. This was the first time he had been defeated by a firearm after coming to this world. Moreover, it was a powerful heavy sniper rifle. I don't believe that a sniper rifle can't kill you. Even if you're a super turtle shell, I'm going to make a hole for you. Tang Jin made up his mind. The sniper rifle in his hand fired continuously like an automatic rifle. The huge recoil caused his shoulder to hurt, and he accidentally missed a few times. However, his efforts finally paid off. When the third bullet hit the water membrane that had been flashing non-stop shattered completely. This caused the Kobold Holy Master to look terrified and turn to escape. T/his chapter is up.d by nvel bin.co/m. Tang Jin was overjoyed when he saw this and pulled the trigger again. The last bullet in the sniper rifle's magazine whizzed out and hit the dog-headed Holy Master's chest. The bullet left a huge hole in the dog-headed Holy Master's body. His skin and flesh were torn apart and his internal organs were all shattered. The dog-headed Holy Master opened and closed his mouth with great difficulty, but in the end, he still lowered his head and looked at his hollowed chest before falling to the ground unwillingly. Tang Jin stood up and replaced the empty magazine. When he turned to look at Tai Seng and the others, he realized that they were still chasing after the dog-headed people. The Holy Dragon City soldiers with high morale were surrounding the fish that had escaped the net. When they saw the dog-headed people that were not completely dead, they would also go up and give them a stab. From the looks of the situation, annihilating this group of hound-head men was no longer a problem. Just as Tang Jin was thinking this in his heart, he suddenly heard a furious roar coming from the vicinity of the dog-headed people's lair. Soon after, he saw a dog-headed person with a lion-like head brandishing a large sword and wearing heavy armor as it rushed over. The dog-headed man's heavy armor seemed to weigh at least 10 pounds, but it was as if he was wearing a cotton shirt, and his running and jumping were not affected at all. Seeing the charging speed of the lion dog-headed man as well as the level 3 cultivation that it revealed, Tang Jin immediately shouted at the machine gunner, "All of you, F*King shoot that Rangar. Throw your grenades at it as well." And NBSP, Tai Seng and the others also saw this imposing fellow. Because of its 1.9-meter height, it was extremely eye-catching among the low dog-headed people. Coupled with its heavy armor, it looked extremely intimidating. With the arrival of a powerful enemy, Tai Seng and the others didn't hesitate. Just as Tang Jin's words fell, a wave of firepower covered the path of the lion dog-headed man. The lion dog-headed man dodged most of the bullets nimbly, while some were blocked by his demonic armor and lost their power. Tyson and the others used up all their bullets, but only a few hit the lion dog-headed man's body. Although it was bleeding, it couldn't stop the lion dog-headed man's charge. Tang Jin watched from the side with fear. The purple lightning short sword in his hand had already been unsheathed. Once the situation changed, he would attack and kill this lion dog-headed man. At the same time, he was carefully observing the lion dog-headed man. He vaguely noticed that its body was covered in a layer of white light. However, as the lion dog-headed man continued to be attacked, the white light was getting weaker and weaker. Upon seeing this, a thought flashed through Tang Jin's mind. He immediately shouted at Tai Seng, "Don't hesitate, beat him to death. Go!" Tai Seng and the others roared and immediately used up all their remaining ammunition. The effect of this attack was obvious. The lion dog-headed man had already taken more than 10 shots, and it was now covered in blood like a god of war. At this moment, the lion dog-headed man had already charged in front of Tai Seng and the others. With a loud roar, he swung his sword at a holy Dragon City warrior. That warrior blocked with his sword, but was sent flying by a huge force. He spat out blood and fell to the ground. "You're courting death." Tai Seng's eyes widened as he threw away the heavy machine gun in his hand and charged forward with his saber. In the blink of an eye, he was already engaged in a battle with the lion dog-headed man. When Tang Jin saw that many soldiers had stopped their pursuit and were guarding at the side to watch the battle, he immediately shouted, "What the hell are you all watching? Charge in and kill all the dog-headed people." Seeing Tang Jin's anger, the Holy Dragon City soldiers were so scared that they shrunk their necks. They immediately brandished their weapons and pounced towards the dog-headed people's nest with murderous intent. Humph. Seeing how Tai Seng and the heavily injured lion dog were equally matched, Qianlong couldn't help but sneer coldly. He pulled his bow and fired an arrow at the lion dog-headed man, but he didn't expect it to pierce through the gap between the lion dog-headed man's leg armor. The lion dog-headed man groaned and knelt on the ground. After glaring at Qianlong, the despicable sneak attacker, with its bell-like eyes, it closed its eyes as if it had accepted its fate. Then, Tai Seng's saber whizzed past, and the lion dog-headed man's basin-sized head rolled onto the ground, looking extremely ferocious. This lion dog-headed man is definitely a peak level 3 expert. If it wasn't for my previous injuries, I wouldn't have been his match at all. There was no hatred in Tai Seng's eyes as he looked at the lion dog-headed man's corpse. Instead, there was a trace of respect. Tang Jin gently nodded his head when he heard this. He used a slow tone and said, "The hatred between our humankind and the non-humankind can never be solved peacefully. Therefore, the final result of the war will always be one side falling down. No matter whether the other side's behavior is worthy of our respect or not, as long as they stand on the opposite side of the rise of the humankind, they will be our common enemy." Tai Seng waved the battle blade in his hand and casually killed a wounded dog-headed man before he looked at Tang Jin and nodded silently. At this time, the battle was nearing its end. The dog-headed people who put up a last-ditch struggle were all killed, and their corpses were strewn all over the field. The stench of blood floated around the battlefield and did not dissipate for a long time. Tang Jin's feet stepped on the ground that was covered in blood and minced meat. His leather boots were constantly wrapped in mud. He slowly walked to the front of the dog-headed man patriarch and sized it up without saying a word. The kobold chieftain's body was covered in wounds, and the corpses of a dozen loyal guards had fallen around it. They had all fought to the last moment, and their bodies were unrecognizable. Seeing Tang Jin standing in front of him, the dog-headed patriarch, who was kneeling on the ground and tied up by a rope, coldly snorted and turned his head to the side. He gritted his teeth, but perhaps because of the pain, the dog-headed patriarch's muscles kept twitching and trembling. However, from the beginning to the end, the dog-headed patriarch didn't make a sound. Although the other party was an enemy of a foreign race, Tang Jin was still full of admiration for the dog-headed people's loyalty and their unyielding will. Since you've chosen to be the enemy of the human race, you'll end up like this sooner or later. What do you have to say before you die? Tang Jin used a cold and indifferent tone as he shouted at the dog-headed man patriarch. Upon hearing Tang Jin's question in the dog-head man's language, the dog-head man patriarch turned his head around and glanced at Tang Jin with a painful but mocking gaze. He then sneered and said, "Despicable human, don't think that you're so great just because you won this battle. In this wilderness, you humans are the most lowly race, only worthy of being slaughtered and enslaved by the dog-headed men and all other races. Just wait and see, I think it won't be long before you and your men will be killed and cooked. At that time, you will find how ridiculous your current appearance is." After the Kobold Patriarch finished speaking, he fiercely stuck out his entire tongue and bit it hard. Tang Jin only heard a slight creak sound and immediately saw blood gushing out of the Kobold Patriarch's mouth like a spring. It coughed out blood and laughed miserably before falling to the ground like mud. Tang Jin looked at the life aura of the dog-headed people's patriarch that was rapidly disappearing. He used a low and deep voice to slowly say, "Perhaps in the eyes of you alien races, the human race is so weak and insignificant that you can bully and kill them at will. However, you have forgotten that the more suffering a race has experienced, the more likely it is for it to rise up in a powerful way. When that day comes, the suffering that the race has suffered will be paid back 10 times more than what the enemy has suffered. I might be the fulcrum for the rise of the human race, and you are very lucky to be the first foreign race to be defeated by me. Perhaps one day, the Kobold race, known for their reproductive ability, will become one of the countless races that will be extinct in this wilderness." Tang Jin's words were not only said to the dead dog-headed man patriarch, but also to himself. He wondered if the Kobold chieftain, who had already stopped breathing, had heard these words and what he was thinking. Looking around, he saw that all the Houndhead men in the hill area had been killed. The warriors were cleaning up the battlefield. They were constantly moving messy things out of the smelly cave. Most of them were dried meat, and a small number of weapons and herbs. Tang Jin didn't even look at the dried meat that was probably made from the blood and flesh of his own kind. He ordered the soldiers to throw it away as he didn't lack such disgusting food. A warrior dragged a leather bag out of the cave. He seemed to be struggling. A sharp stone on the ground accidentally cut the leather bag, revealing the golden object inside. Tang Jin immediately walked over when he saw this. He ordered the soldier to open the leather bag. Immediately after, countless objects of various sizes that were shining with golden light appeared before Tang Jin's eyes. With just a glance, he was sure that these artifacts were made of gold. The shape and decoration were very familiar, and they were of the same origin as the gold artifacts used by the Nomadic Rich Exploration Team. After ordering the soldiers to pour all these gold products on the ground, Tang Jin rummaged around and picked out a gorgeous golden disc. It was full of strange decorative patterns and text-like symbols. After activating the mysterious word cracker, the words on the gilded disc were easily cracked and turned into words that Tang Jin could read and understand. Tang Jin looked at the contents of the words on the golden disc and could not help but frown. The natural disaster has come, and the world has collapsed. The prophecy of our ancestors has come true, but the brave Glittergold race will not sit still and wait for death. We have built the safest sanctuary, and all of our people can hide in it. After the disaster is over, the sanctuary will be reactivated, and we will still be the overlords of the world. Tang Jin could easily determine that these golden objects came from a refuge shelter called the Flashing Gold Race through the words cast on the golden disc. All of their clansmen were hiding in this refuge shelter in the hope of avoiding the so-called natural disaster. However, when these gold items appeared in the world of Lucheng, it meant that their plan had failed. The Glittergold race, who had tried to dominate the world after the disaster, might never be able to wait until the day to open the sanctuary. According to the strange laws of this other world, buildings destroyed by disasters like this would appear in the form of wild buildings, followed by living creatures that were destroyed together with them. However, they would all become monsters with brains. The foundation that Tang Jin used to build the Holy Dragon City came from the wild buildings and the bank. There were no bank employees or customers who had turned into monsters because these monsters had been killed by the bloodthirsty gnomes and became their food. Monsters eating monsters was also a very common phenomenon in the endless wilderness, so there was nothing to be surprised about. Tang Jin put down the gilded disc and slowly walked back to the off-road vehicle. He lit a cigarette and considered whether he should clean up the Shining Tribe sanctuary. Tang Jin was in need of money. The gold in the sanctuary could bring him a huge amount of wealth. Tang Jin was also in need of brains. The glitter gold people in the sanctuary who had turned into monsters could provide him with a huge amount of brains, even high-level brains. The most important thing was that Tang Jin was very likely to obtain the books and materials left behind by the Flashing Gold tribe in the sanctuary. This was what he was most interested in. Even if the first two items were not there, as long as he could obtain valuable books and materials, Tang Jin felt that this trip was not a loss. After thinking about it, Tang Jin couldn't seem to find a reason to give up exploring the Flashing Gold race's sanctuary. Tang Jin made a decision in his heart after thinking of this. He turned around and saw that the battlefield had been cleared. Other than the dog-headed people's corpses that were strewn all over the ground, no one cared about them. The rest of the useful items had been packed up by the soldiers and placed on the transport trucks, filling up the place. A portion of the spoils would be given to them. The soldiers who participated in the battle would also receive points or coins distributed by the Holy Dragon City. The points could be used to upgrade their level and status. They could use the battle to sustain the battle, using benefits and glory to ensure that the soldiers would always be filled with the desire to fight. Since everything was over, Tang Jin indicated that they should return to the Holy Dragon City. Because the transport vehicles were occupied, the soldiers could only return on foot. They followed the slowly moving vehicles and lined up in a column as they advanced in the wilderness. The orderly footsteps of the warriors, accompanied by the sound of swords and sabers clashing against armor, became a unique accompaniment in this wilderness. However, this accompaniment was full of solemnity, representing iron blood and death. Tang Jin sat in the carriage and looked at the long line of soldiers in a daze. However, he was fantasizing in his heart that there would be a day when millions of Holy Dragon City's soldiers would wear armor and form an endless square formation to conquer all the enemies in the endless wilderness. With his continuous efforts, perhaps the day when his dream would come true would not be far. Although the world of Luqing was extremely large, the time it took to rotate between day and night was only slightly longer than the original world. When night was about to fall, the soldiers had already arrived at the entrance of the Holy Dragon City Valley. The Holy Dragon City's residents and wanderers, who had received the news long ago, came forward to welcome them. They lined the streets to welcome them, bringing water and food to the soldiers. At the same time, they looked at the mountain-like piles of spoils of war on the transport carriages, their eyes full of envy. In this wilderness, fighting and killing had become an instinct for almost every man. To be able to come back alive after every battle and bring back a pile of spoils of war was already regarded as a supreme honor by the wanderers, because it represented strength and the hope of the survival of the family. Even though they were now residents of the Holy Dragon City and no longer had to worry about starving in the morning, nor did they have to worry about food for the next day, this mindset that was deeply rooted in their hearts had not changed at all. Moreover, they had come out to kill the dog-headed people. Out of their common hatred for the alien races, the residents and wanderers were full of respect for these warriors. When the transport carriages stopped at the plaza in front of the building, a Holy Dragon City manager immediately directed the wanderers to move forward and unload the spoils of war from the transport carriages. Then, they temporarily piled them up in the Wanderer Market, which had already been completed. As the wanderers carried the spoils of war, they drooled in envy. At the same time, they estimated how much food and weapons these spoils of war could be exchanged for. Seeing the Holy Dragon City's warriors, who appeared awe-inspiring after being fully equipped, they felt even more envious. Many strong wanderers, who were confident in their strength, were secretly thinking about how they could become Holy Dragon City's warriors. When the time came, they could also get a set of expensive equipment. When they thought of how they would look in armor and hold swords in their hands, they became more and more eager. They tried their best to show off their abilities while carrying the spoils of war, hoping that they would be noticed by the manager and recruited into the army. Even if they could not become an official soldier of Holy Dragon City, as long as they could become an auxiliary soldier, they would be satisfied. Tang Jin took in this scene and laughed in his heart. These wanderers might not have realized that since Tang Jin had allowed them to enter the valley, he definitely did not have the intention of letting them leave. Sooner or later, these wanderers would become official residents of Holy Dragon City. However, at this moment, it was not the time to tell them these things. First of all, the number of resident slots in the first-level city was limited, and they could not be allocated an identity card at all. Moreover, Tang Jin wanted them to endure for a longer period of time and see the benefits enjoyed by the residents of the Holy Dragon City. This way, the expectations in their hearts would become heavier and heavier. When they became official residents of the Holy Dragon City, they would also cherish this hard-won identity. Tang Jin inadvertently turned his head and saw a brawny man among the wanderers carrying a leather bag as he strode toward the wanderer market. The leather bag was filled with all the gold items from the Flashing Gold Race's sanctuary. Such a heavy leather bag, when placed on the strong man's body, was like carrying a bag of wheat bran, which was extremely easy. He took a closer look at the brawny man carrying the leather bag. It was the captain of the rich exploration team, the guy whose head was a little rusty. This was a very interesting fellow. When Tang Jin heard that he had just arrived, he was very unconvinced of Tai Seng, who had beaten him to the ground. He thought that Tai Seng was just using his power to bully others. Otherwise, he, who was also a rank 2 expert, would not have been easily defeated by Tai Seng. When Tai Seng, who was bored to death, heard this, he immediately gave the team leader a chance to redeem his honor and promised that if he failed, he would give him a bag of food as compensation. The team leader was overjoyed when he heard this. He immediately took off his arms and started fighting with Tai Seng on the grass. Although this team leader's brain wasn't too good, he had a lot of strength. In this aspect, even Tai Seng was slightly inferior. Unfortunately, in a battle, just relying on strength alone and fierce attacks might not be enough to win. Tai Seng's strength was only slightly inferior to the nouveau riche captain, but his combat experience far exceeded his opponent's. Furthermore, ever since Tang Jin had sorted out the martial arts combat videos he had obtained from the original world and continuously played them for the cultivators and warriors of the Holy Dragon City to watch, Tai Seng had already created a unique combat technique based on his own experience and what he had learned from the videos. It was simple and sharp, and every move was fatal. It wasn't an overstatement to say that in terms of technique and experience, the team leader was miles behind Tai Seng. It was precisely because of this that the originally high-spirited team leader was completely screwed over by Tai Seng during the battle. Almost every attack was like a bull's, but Tai Seng easily dodged the attacks. Then, with just a single move, the team leader would fall flat on his face. Up to TED Chapters NNVelben.com. What was even more infuriating was that Tai Seng even gave a live lesson, explaining the principles and techniques of a certain move to the surrounding Holy Dragon City soldiers as he fought, causing the spectators to either praise him or applaud him. They would then mock the Tycoon Captain a few times, one after another, causing the Tycoon Captain's lungs to explode with anger. "Didn't you say that we're going to fight fair and square? You brought some people here to watch the fun and keep mocking me. What kind of hero are you?" The rich captain was furious. After getting up, he attacked Tai Seng even more fiercely, but he was still knocked to the ground again and again. On the other hand, Tai Seng only took a punch to his face because he was not careful, but he was still full of energy and laughing. Just when the team leader was thrown down for the 20th time and thought that he would never be able to catch Tai Seng and throw him to the ground with his ultimate move, for some reason, Tai Seng's lapels were caught by him. And NBSP, the team leader, was overjoyed. Just as he was about to hug Tai Seng and lift him up high before falling down, he felt his arm being bent in a weird way. Then, his entire arm was locked behind him and he could no longer move. Then, he heard Tai Seng roar towards the surrounding, "All of you, look carefully. This is the so-called capture of that swan and I." Yes, it's a capture. It uses its joints and weak points to attack the weak points of the enemy's body. You see, although this guy is strong, once I use this move to lock him down, he can't move anymore. After saying this, Tyson let go of his hand and kicked the rich captain's butt. The rich captain was caught off guard and pounced forward. Once again, he performed a gorgeous action of stealing *T. In the following period of time, Tai Seng seemed to have gotten addicted to the game as he kept using the rich captain as a human target, testing all kinds of fighting techniques that he had learned, but he made the rich captain look extremely embarrassed. In the end, the team leader, who had a bloody nose and a swollen face, finally admitted in his heart that he couldn't beat this guy with a stomach full of strange tricks. However, he was stubborn and refused to admit defeat, so he just lay on the ground and pretended to be dead, causing everyone to laugh. However, ever since he was beaten up that time, the team leader had become Tai Seng's lackey. As long as he had the chance, he would approach Tai Seng and smile while flattering him, trying to learn a thing or two from him. Every time, Tai Seng would squint his eyes and sneer as he looked up and down at the tycoon captain. He was well aware of the latter's sinister intentions. Damn it, didn't he just want to learn my moves and then take revenge on me after he was done? With that brain of yours that doesn't know how to spin, even if I were to teach you, you wouldn't be able to *King learn. Therefore, every time this happened, Tai Seng would kick the rich captain's butt and then swagger away. However, the team leader had strong willpower, or rather, he was a one-track-minded person. Even if he was beaten up this time, he would continue to suck up to Tai Seng the next time he saw him. In the end, whenever Tai Seng saw the nouveau riche captain, he would shrink his neck and quickly run away. He was really scared of this guy and couldn't be bothered anymore. He thought to himself, I can't afford to offend him, but I can at least hide. Tang Jin was thinking about the interesting story of the rich captain. Coincidentally, he had returned once again. He waved his hand and ordered the soldiers beside him to call him over. When the rich captain heard Tang Jin calling him, he immediately jogged over and stood in front of Tang Jin. He grinned and said, "City Lord, why did you call for me? If there's anything, just say the word. This little one will definitely get it done for you." Tang Jin nodded with a smile. He took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket and handed it to the rich captain, almost causing the latter's snot to pop out. This was good stuff. The price in the Wanderer market was very high. Even among the residents of the Holy Dragon City, few people were qualified to smoke it. Now that he had a pack, Old Mike and the other Holy Dragon City rascals would definitely go crazy with envy. At the thought of this, the rich captain felt as if his heart had been soaked in honey. It was so sweet that when he smiled, even his molars could be clearly seen. Cigarettes were a good thing. Whether it was in the original world or in the other world, there were a group of people who were obsessed with the feeling of smoking. However, in the world of Lucheng, cigarettes were something only the big shots were qualified to enjoy. After all, there were only a limited number of cigarettes found in the wild buildings, and many wanderers had never even heard of them. Seeing that the rich captain, who had obtained a rare item, was in a good mood, Tang Jin opened his mouth and asked, "The weapons you used before were very strange. Where did you get them from?" The team leader's smile immediately disappeared, and he said with a sad face, "City Lord, you don't know, but I almost lost my life in order to get these junk." Tang Jin's interest was piqued when he heard this. He continued to ask, "Tell me, what's going on?" The rich captain revealed a reminiscing expression as he gestured to Tangjin while explaining, "That day, someone ran over and told me that there was a hole on the slope not far away. There seemed to be something inside, but everyone was afraid of the danger inside, so they didn't dare to go down and check. I became interested and led a group of brothers to run over. We found that there really was a hole on the hill. However, the hole was very small, and not even people could get in. After throwing a torch in, I observed it with the light of the fire and found that there was a lot of shiny metal inside. City Lord, you don't know, but I was so happy at that time. I secretly thought about how many weapons could be made with this metal and how many brains could be exchanged. You know, we only have 2 rusty weapons in our hands. These metals meant a lot of wealth, who wouldn't be tempted? I couldn't hold it in any longer and quickly ordered people to enlarge the hole. I carried a rusty knife and a torch as I walked in. When I got inside, I realized that the hole was actually a huge room. The shiny metal inside was made into all kinds of things, each of which was very heavy. I picked up a metal bar from the ground and tried to break it. The metal bar bent. I didn't expect that the hardness of this metal was not as good as the iron bone grass in the wilderness. How could it be made into a weapon? At that time, I was discouraged. My heart ached that I couldn't make a sharp weapon with this room full of metal. Just as I was about to turn around and leave, a smart brother in the tribe said that we could use this metal to make a hammer, or even flatten it to make armor. After all, it was still metal, and it was better than a weapon made of bones. Moreover, it looked quite scary. When I heard that, I also agreed, so I called my brothers to start moving the metal, and we especially picked the small ones because we couldn't move the big ones. As we moved things out, When the rich captain said this, he paused for a moment and smacked his lips twice. When Tangjin saw this, he gave a look to Old Mike, who was listening with great interest. Old Mike immediately took the water bottle from his waist and handed it over. At the same time, he urged, "F***ck, you're such a busybody. Hurry up and drink some water. After you're done, you can continue your lecture." The rich captain looked really thirsty. After drinking the entire bottle of water, he wiped his mouth and continued. At that time, one of the brothers saw a big stick standing on the ground. The thickness and length were just right for a weapon, so he pulled it out with all his strength, but he couldn't pull it out. Then he pushed it forward, but he didn't expect to actually push it this time. But then, a crack suddenly appeared on one of the walls. The crack grew bigger and bigger, and at the same time, an indescribable stench drifted out. I could vaguely see something moving behind the crack, so I stuck my face to the crack to take a look. It was this one look that gave me a big fright. When the rich captain said this, his face revealed a lingering fear. After wiping the cold sweat on his face, he continued to say to Tangjin, "My God, it turns out that behind the crack, there are monsters densely packed together. There are big monsters, small monsters, floating monsters, and even those metal monsters made of shiny metal, blocking the passage behind the crack tightly. Once these monsters run out, all of us, including the men, women, old, and young of the tribe, will be F***king finished." I was so scared that I broke out in a cold sweat. I immediately shouted at the brother who was pulling the metal rod and asked him to pull the rod back. The brother saw that the situation was not good, and before I could finish speaking, he put the metal rod back. After the metal rod was pulled back, the crack stopped opening and quickly closed. However, a few metal spiders still ran out of the crack and headed straight for us. These spiders were only the size of a fist, but they were extremely fast. One of the brothers couldn't dodge in time and was bitten by the metal spider. Then, his entire body immediately fell to the ground like a stiff stone. After seeing this, I realized that the metal spider is poisonous. I can't let it bite me, or I'll die. Thinking of this, I shouted at my brothers not to panic. Then I raised a piece of metal beside me and smashed it. Coincidentally, the metal spider could not move at all. Seeing this, the other brothers also picked up the things around them and smashed the metal spiders in the face. We were lucky that the metal spiders couldn't move after being hit. We were relieved. When we went to check on the brother who was bitten, we found that his face was blue and he was long dead. After that, we put the bodies of our lost brothers up there and then sealed the hole with stones, planning to never go in again. As for the metal that we brought out, we made it into a sledgehammer and armor. In the end, other than me, everyone complained that the metal was too heavy and soft. They even wanted to throw it away. I was so angry that I went up and beat up those guys. Damn it, this was something that I had exchanged my brothers' lives for. How could I throw it away just like that? Besides, it felt pretty good to use this kind of big hammer to hit monsters. The rich captain explained everything in one breath, including the origin of the gold and some information about the Shining Gold Tribe Sanctuary. From the rich captain's description, Tangjin's previous guess was completely correct. The refuge of the Glitter Gold race was already filled with monsters. As for the metal spiders, they might be the technological products of the Glitter Gold race. Now that the existence of the Flashing Gold Tribe Sanctuary had been confirmed, the next thing to do was to clean up and explore it. Tangjin sat in his room, his mind filled with thoughts about the Flashing Gold race's sanctuary. A sanctuary that could accommodate the entire Glitter Gold race must be extremely large. If they could obtain its foundation and gradually upgrade it, then the Holy Dragon City would have a huge underground structure. This would only be good for the Holy Dragon City. However, it was precisely because of the large area of this shelter that the number of monsters inside was likely to be very large. Even if someone told Tangjin that there were more than 1 million monsters inside, Tangjin would choose to believe it because it was very likely. Some people might think that such a large number of monsters was too terrifying. However, to Tangjin, this refuge was a huge treasure. As long as he patiently cleared it out, he would be able to obtain a huge amount of brains and gold. He might even be able to raise his cultivation level once again. Regardless of the reason, he had to clean up the shelter. However, there was a problem now. The location of the Flashing Gold race's sanctuary was far away from Holy Dragon City. It was not suitable for a long-term exploration at all, because it involved safety, survival, logistics, and many other aspects. With Holy Dragon City's current strength, it could not support such a large-scale operation. Was it possible that he had to clean up by himself? However, the efficiency of doing so was too low. It was far slower than a group of people cleaning up. Not to mention, Tangjin couldn't stay in the sanctuary to clean up monsters every day. Once he had something to do, no one would take over. This would definitely affect his work efficiency. Tangjin frowned as he pondered. How should he resolve this problem? Tangjin had unconsciously formed a habit. When he encountered a problem that he couldn't solve, he would look for a solution in the application store. This time, he habitually opened the application store and indeed found a solution. Terrain Transformation Plugin. It can transform the terrain of any map. It can be used once a day for 1 minute. It consumes 10,000 gold coins per minute. The download amount is 1 million gold coins. Tangjin's eyes lit up as he looked at the introduction. Once he had this application, he would be able to move the Flashing Gold race's sanctuary near his Holy Dragon City without any effort. This way, many problems would be solved. However, it would cost 1 million gold to download the application. Although he still had some brains in his pocket, they were for upgrading the building. Even if he used them, they would not be enough for 1 million gold. Tangjin frowned slightly. How should he solve the gold coin problem? After pondering for a while, Tangjin finally endured his heartache and took out a brain pearl that was surrounded by a faint light ring from his storage space. This was the level 6 brain pearl that he had snatched from the corpse monster lord, which was also a lord tier brain pearl. Tangjin had been keeping this brain bead for a long time. He planned to use it when he upgraded Lu Qing in the future. However, looking at the current situation, he was afraid that he had to use it in advance. According to the exchange rate of brain bead and gold coins, this level 6 brain bead could be exchanged for 1 million gold coins. Tangjin looked at the pearl of brain with a sense of nostalgia and gave the order to absorb it. Then, the pearl of brain in his hand disappeared instantly, and an additional 1 million gold coins appeared in the application store. Tangjin sighed. He was really unwilling to just spend the 1 million gold coins that he had spent so much effort on. Could he think of a way to spend as little gold coins as possible? That's right, the last time he looked at the intermediate lottery area of the Lucky Wheel, he found a random discount card. At that time, he only took a look at it and ignored it. After Tangjin thought up to this point, he immediately activated the Lucky Wheel and carefully searched the intermediate lottery area. As expected, he saw the random discount card. However, when he thought about the 1% chance of winning the lottery, Tangjin slightly scratched his head. In his spare time, he had tried the basic lottery draw a few times. In the end, he only got a few basic cards that were not of much use to him. The cards that Tangjin had given to Ivanov and the other man were the prizes for the basic lottery draw. Therefore, Tangjin had always loved and hated the Lucky Wheel. However, he had to take a gamble today. Whether or not he could save the gold coins would depend on his luck. According to the rules of the intermediate lottery, the price of each bet was 100 gold coins. At the same time, one blank space could be removed. Tangjin calculated that there were a total of 240 blank spaces in the intermediate lottery wheel. If he were to bet all of them, he would need a total of 24,000 gold coins. However, the rules required that he couldn't place all his bets. Instead, he had to leave 10 empty slots. This way, he would have to spend 23,000 gold coins. According to the 1 in 10 chance, if he was unlucky and had to draw 10 times to win, Tangjin would probably have to put in 230,000 gold coins. N/W novel chapters are published on no/vel/bin.co/m. However, there was another problem. Once a prize in a blank space was drawn, a new prize would appear. There was a guarantee that there would be 10 blank spaces. Therefore, Tangjin did not dare to guarantee that he would not draw a prize in a blank space again during the lottery draw. I don't care anymore, I'll risk it this time. After Tangjin thought up to this point, he immediately took out the 3 lucky cards that he had previously saved up from his storage space. These were also the Lucky Wheel's basic prizes that he had previously saved up. He tore the 3 cards with both hands, and they immediately turned into specks of light and dissipated. At the same time, he felt an indescribable confidence in his heart, and he immediately began to draw the lottery. The 20,000 gold disappeared in the blink of an eye, and the remaining 10 areas contained the random discount card. As Tangjin activated the Lucky Wheel, a rapidly spinning interface appeared before his eyes. When the interface stopped, a card appeared in front of him. Congratulations! You have obtained a universal appraisal card. Tangjin curled his mouth and kept the card. He placed his bet on the Lucky Wheel once again. His gaze was fixed on the spinning Lucky Wheel and he was unwilling to relax even a little. Congratulations! You have obtained a super positioning card. Black lines appeared on Tangjin's forehead as he secretly guessed in his heart. Could it be that the beginner lucky card was not useful for the intermediate lucky draw? Another lottery draw began. Tangjin's heart clenched as he secretly prayed that he would win. He must win. As the wheel stopped, a notification appeared. Tangjin's vision turned black and he almost fell to the ground. Congratulations, you have obtained a permanent sex change card. Damn, what the hell is in this lucky wheel? Tangjin cursed in his heart. Only then did he raise his spirit and place another bet. However, this time, he was already somewhat lacking in confidence. He was afraid that he would draw some strange card. Congratulations! You've won a random discount card. The wheel stopped and the card appeared. Tangjin was stunned for a moment when he saw the content of the prompt. Immediately after, his face was filled with wild joy as he excitedly shouted. Holding the dazzling card in his hand, Tangjin wished he could give it a kiss. Next, he would have to see if this random discount card was powerful or not. While downloading the Terrain Transformation plugin, Tangjin also used the random discount card. Then, he saw the 1,000,000 words under the application rapidly scroll and suddenly stopped after a few seconds. The random discount card has been successfully used. The discount rate is 5, and the download amount is 500,000 gold coins. F***CK, that's awesome. This feeling is too good. Tangjin roared excitedly. This lucky card was indeed useful. He didn't expect to get a 50% discount. With this, he could save half of his gold coins. After deducting 500,000 gold coins, Tangjin started the application after it was downloaded and installed. The terrain around him instantly appeared in front of his eyes. At the same time, he could circle an area with his mind and transform it. The transformation would take 1 minute, and the effect was still unknown. Tangjin studied the Terrain Transformation plugin for a while and found that he still needed a few conditions to successfully move the Flashing Gold Race's sanctuary over. First of all, the time needed to transform the terrain was too short. In such a short time, it seemed that he could not do anything at all. If he could cooperate with the map teleportation function, it would be much easier. Also, how deep could the terrain modification plugin affect? Would it move the entire area above and below the ground, or only the surface? Tangjin thought for a moment and decided to personally test it out to determine the most realistic effect. However, if he wanted to compare it with other uses, this was a gold-devouring beast. It seemed like the 10,000 gold coins were going to be wasted. Tangjin didn't want to spend this money, but he had no choice. He walked out of the room and came to a huge rock in the valley. The rock was about 10 meters above the ground, and the volume underground was probably even larger. It was the most suitable to test the effect of the terrain modification plugin. Following his thought control, the Terrain Transformation plugin instantly covered the huge rock and the surrounding land. With a thought, Tangjin activated the map teleportation plugin at the same time, and his entire person instantly disappeared. At the same time, an extremely deep and bottomless hole suddenly appeared where the boulder had been. The air in the hole flickered with faint ripples, as if it could devour everything in the world. In the blink of an eye, the surrounding earth squeezed over and filled the empty space. The terrifying black hole also quickly disappeared, making it impossible to tell that a boulder had disappeared here. 10 seconds later, Tangjin rushed back like lightning. At the same time, he picked up the phone that he had placed aside with the camera function on. Looking at the scene captured by the phone and then combining it with the situation he had observed through the map, the stone in Tangjin's heart was finally lifted and he laughed out loud. Something like this, which involved huge benefits and was also a matter of monopolizing the food, had to be completed cleanly and neatly. Any delay would lead to changes. What the endless wilderness didn't lack the most were flies that chased after the smell of fish and hungry wolves that were brutal and bloodthirsty. Once he was discovered by them, Tangjin wouldn't need to silently dream of getting rich. However, if he wanted to move the Flashing Gold Race's sanctuary over as soon as possible, he couldn't completely rely on the terrain modification plugin. He still needed help from other aspects. Therefore, Tangjin exchanged some more gold coins. After barely gathering 500,000 gold coins, he upgraded the map to a high level, causing the visible range to reach a radius of 10 kilometers. The reason why Tangjin did this was to coordinate with the terrain transformation plugin. This way, the distance he could teleport to would be greatly increased. He would only need a few days to move the entire Fallout shelter. Ups.at from n0/v/lbn/.co/m. Even if the matter of moving the Flashing Gold Race's sanctuary did not happen, Tangjin also had plans to upgrade the map. The original visible area of the map was barely enough for him, but it was of little value to the Holy Dragon City. Now that the map had been upgraded, Tangjin's visual range had greatly increased. This way, the area within 10 kilometers of Holy Dragon City would be under Tangjin's surveillance, which greatly increased the safety index of Holy Dragon City. However, in this way, Tangjin was once again reduced to a poor man. There were not many brains left in his hand. The feeling of having an empty wallet was quite unpleasant. The brainless Tangjin had already placed his hopes on the refuge of the Flashing Gold Race, hoping to get a satisfactory return from there. The process of moving the Flashing Gold Tribe's sanctuary did not require too many people to follow. Tangjin only needed to confirm the location and he could complete it alone. However, before that, he needed a guide, so the rich captain had to follow him. Early the next morning, Tangjin drove the off-road vehicle and pulled along Tyson and the rich captain out of the Sacred Dragon Valley, heading straight for the cave that the rich captain had discovered. However, the team leader of the Tycoons was someone who only remembered what he was fed and not what he was beaten up. When he saw that Tyson had killed a monster with the heavy machine gun, he immediately asked him to teach him how to operate the heavy machine gun. F***CK. Tyson was so angry that he beat up the team leader again, but he still couldn't suppress the curiosity of the team leader. Looking at the curious team leader with panda eyes, Tyson rubbed his head helplessly and closed his eyes to play dead without a word. Seeing that Tyson didn't pay attention to him and didn't dare to harass Tangjin, the rich captain could only stare at the heavy machine gun. No one knew what he was thinking about, but he didn't notice it at all and was still giggling. Tangjin speechlessly shook his head when he saw this. He secretly thought that this nouveau riche captain was really a top-grade living treasure. The number of times that Tyson would get a headache from being pestered by this fellow was likely to increase. The off-road vehicle sped all the way and was getting closer and closer to the place where the rich captain had buried the hole. Tangjin realized that the location of the hole was not far from the hill where the dog-headed people lived. It was no wonder that the rich captain's clansmen were discovered and captured by the dog-headed people. When the off-road vehicle arrived near a hill, the rich captain pointed to a cliff in front of them and said, "City Lord, that's the place. Look at the place we're covering. The soil is different from the other places." Tangjin nodded and jumped down from the car. After carefully sizing it up, he jumped onto the cliff and activated the detection function in the all-round data combat interface. This detection function included the Earth-penetrating radar and Earth-forming image. Tangjin had used it once when he left Black Rock City on the Panlos stairs. As Tangjin activated the application, countless dots and lines began to gradually form in front of his eyes. Not long after, a super-huge building model buried deep underground with a top area of 5 square kilometers and a depth of 1 kilometer appeared in front of Tangjin. Looking at the various data displayed in front of him, Tangjin secretly sighed at the strength of the Flashing Gold clan. Then, he gestured for Tyson to immediately leave with the rich captain and drive back to the Holy Dragon City. Upon hearing this, Tyson nodded and told Tangjin to pay attention to his safety. Then, he pulled the rich captain into the off-road vehicle and disappeared into the wilderness. After the off-road vehicle disappeared, Tangjin took a deep breath and activated the terrain transformation plugin. After he circled the area around the sanctuary, he immediately began to run wildly. After the off-road vehicle disappeared, Tangjin took a deep breath and activated the Terrain Transformation plugin. After he circled the area around the sanctuary, he immediately began to run wildly. At the same time, the Terrain plugin began to count down. The shelter that Tangjin had surrounded followed him like a shadow and moved quickly underground. The surface of the ground was filled with turbulent waves. The scene was as if there was a giant monster lurking underground and it was currently chasing after Tangjin. Tangjin seemed to be running with all his might. As the countdown gradually came to an end, his figure suddenly disappeared and appeared at the edge of the map. As he disappeared, the flashing gold tribe sanctuary that followed him also disappeared. It then appeared at Tangjin's feet 10 kilometers away. When he saw the flashing gold tribe sanctuary that followed him, Tangjin let out a long breath and sat on the ground to rest. With his running and teleportation, he had moved the flashing gold tribe sanctuary 11 kilometers. At this speed, he only needed 3 days to move the sanctuary to the sacred Dragon Valley. Since today's plugin function had been used up, there was no point for Tangjin to stay here. So he started the transmission and returned to the warehouse of the Ice Bear Alliance. This time, he needed to prepare a batch of equipment for the exploration and cleaning, such as headlamps, flashlights, communication equipment, power generation equipment, cables, lamps, and so on. The reason why Tangjin wanted to purchase generators and other items was that he planned to lay lighting equipment while cleaning to facilitate the subsequent cleaning work. This refuge of the flashing gold race was extremely huge. It was definitely not something that could be done in a day to clean it up. Therefore, Tangjin naturally had to make plans for a long time. In addition to these auxiliary equipment, Tangjin also planned to get a batch of weapons for killing monsters, such as flamethrowers, high-power grape shotguns, fragment grenades, and so on. If necessary, he would also equip the soldiers entering the fallout shelter with sufficient safety equipment and biochemical gas masks to avoid unnecessary losses. After making a list of the required items, Tangjin made a phone call and contacted a low-level member of Eternal Heaven who was sent by Ivanov to be in charge of the material collection and preparation work. This member used to be Ivanov's subordinate and knew a little about Tangjin's matters. It was because of this that this brawny man from the Ice Bear Alliance became a fanatical admirer of Tangjin. After receiving Tangjin's phone call, the brawny man named Peter respectfully greeted Tangjin and asked what instructions Tangjin had. After Peter recorded all the items Tangjin needed, he said that he would prepare everything within 3 days. Tangjin nodded his head when he heard this and encouraged Peter with a few words. He immediately became extremely excited and repeatedly expressed that he was willing to go through water and tread on fire for the Oracle, even if he had to die. After hanging up the phone, Tangjin stretched his muscles and took out a few cans of beer from the refrigerator. He slowly drank while flipping through the green leaf books of the Tree Spirit tribe. When the plugin could be used the next day, Tangjin used the same old trick and moved the flashing gold race's sanctuary 11 kilometers in the direction of Holy Dragon City. After calculating the remaining distance, Tangjin only needed to move one more time to complete the mission. After returning to the warehouse of the Ice Bear Alliance, Tangjin found that Peter had already transported some materials over. Tangjin, who had nothing to do, went forward to check. It could be seen that Peter worked very hard because the materials that he handled were of the best quality among the same products. Even some very useful items that Tangjin didn't expect were purchased by Peter and sent here. Tangjin was very satisfied with this. He would never be stingy with such a good subordinate. Therefore, he directly rewarded Peter with a top-quality ruby the size of a quail egg, which made Peter shed tears of gratitude after being shocked. This man from the Ice Bear Alliance had a very heavy family pressure and his life was also very tight. Even after following Ivanov, his life had not improved much. The top-quality ruby that Tangjin rewarded him would undoubtedly help him escape poverty and become rich in an instant. This moved Peter and at the same time, he made up his mind to be at Tangjin's beck and call. When the third day arrived, Tangjin finally moved the Flashing Gold Tribe's sanctuary to a place not far from the sacred Dragon Valley. He had originally planned to place the sanctuary outside, but when he thought about the problems of safety and confidentiality, he finally took the risk and moved it under the sacred Dragon Valley. Tangjin's actions had caused a huge underground city to appear beneath the Holy Dragon Valley. Other than Tangjin, no one knew that there were countless monsters lurking beneath the Holy Dragon City. Tangjin did not care about this because as long as they guarded the exit of the sanctuary, the monsters entrenched in the sanctuary would not be able to escape from the sanctuary even if they had great abilities. Moreover, according to the nature of the monsters in the wild building, they would not easily leave the area where the building was located, so there was no need to worry about them running around. Now that he had this Flashing Gold Race sanctuary to farm monsters, Tangjin would probably be very busy in the future. After gathering all the management personnel of the Holy Dragon City, Tangjin announced this matter. Unsurprisingly, it caused some panic. However, when the residents thought of the city lord's magical ability to move a wild building from the underground tens of kilometers away, they felt that their worries were unnecessary. What kind of person was the city lord? He was a man with great ability, so he didn't need to worry about what he did. It was better to do his job well and listen to the city lord's command. Seeing everyone's obedient appearance, Tangjin chose the combatants who entered the sanctuary for the first time and began to distribute equipment. At the same time, he discussed with everyone about the things they needed to pay attention to when exploring the wild building. Many of these residents had participated in the exploration of the wild building and were considered experienced. They put their heads together and developed many emergency plans. To the soldiers of the Holy Dragon City, exploring the wild building was an exciting thing because it meant surprises and rewards, which would make them extremely excited. Not to mention that the wild building was right at their doorstep, which was simply ideal. After the discussion was over, everyone dispersed. Tangjin went to the entrance of the refuge shelter, which was guarded by the Holy Dragon City cultivators, by himself. After taking a look around, he returned to his room to rest. Early the next morning, Tangjin and the fully armed soldiers went to the entrance of the sanctuary after having breakfast. Tangjin's expression was very serious as he looked at the excavated entrance of the Flashing Gold Tribe's sanctuary. 5 cultivators holding heavy machine guns pointed their muzzles at the shelter. The rest of the soldiers also held their weapons in their hands and waited for Tangjin's orders. They were both nervous and anticipating the battle that was about to begin. A few soldiers carefully placed some specially made metal boxes at the exit of the sanctuary. These were weapons specially made by Tangjin's men. Each metal box was filled with steel balls and explosives. They could achieve a directional explosion and could cause extremely terrifying large area damage to monsters. After all the metal boxes were installed, Tangjin held a heavy machine gun in his hand and indicated for Qianlong to open the entrance of the sanctuary. Qianlong nodded and walked in. He pulled the golden handle with all his might, and the golden wall covered in decorative patterns slowly opened. However, Qianlong didn't leave immediately. Instead, he gave a look to the Holy Dragon City cultivators who were on standby. The 2 cultivators quickly rushed to the crack and threw 2 specially made 2-meter-long thick iron pipes in. When Thousand Dragons saw the steel pipe being thrown in, he immediately returned the wrench to its original position. As the crack slowly closed, everyone seemed to hear the unwilling roar of a monster. During this time, a few monster arms reached out from the crack and waved non-stop, but they were unable to break through the 1.5-meter thick door. A few golden spiders that tried to escape were crushed into powder by the incomparably thick golden door. At the last moment when the door was about to close, Tangjin gently pressed the button in his hand, and a series of explosions faintly sounded from behind the golden door. It seemed to be mixed with the painful screams of the monster. The/W novel chapters are published on no/vel/bin.co/m. Tangjin believed that these two explosive tubes filled with TNT and tiny steel balls would give these monsters a deep impression. Tangjin threw the gun in his hand away and signaled Qianlong to open the door again. This time, they were going to fight with real weapons. Qianlong didn't hesitate and opened the door again. He then jumped out and picked up a grape shotgun from the ground before aiming it at the entrance of the shelter. As the golden door opened again, a bloody smell mixed with a rancid smell was extremely pungent. Dozens of metal spiders impatiently ran out from the gap of the door, but they were blocked by the metal net on the ground. The metal net was connected to an electric source by Tangjin. As soon as the golden spiders came into contact with it, they began to wriggle violently. At the same time, electric sparks flashed. Dozens of golden spiders soon stopped struggling and hung on the metal net. There were a few golden spiders that were not electrocuted, but they were shot to pieces by the dense bullets, not even leaving behind an intact corpse. At this moment, the golden door was already half open. Tangjin could clearly see the scene behind the door. He could see that the monster's limbs were everywhere in the wide passage. Dirty blood was splashed everywhere. The ground was piled with a layer of thick meat and blood, appearing muddy. Several hundred human-shaped monsters let out strange cries as they pounced forward. Some of them were wearing shiny cloth robes, while others were wearing dazzling armors. Each of them had a malevolent expression and an inch-long horn on top of their heads. At the same time, they were all wearing headbands that were engraved with the words of the flashing gold race. "Lie down, detonate." Under Tangjin's command, all the metal boxes that were placed in advance were detonated. A series of loud explosions were heard, and the monsters' screams were endless. When the smoke and dust dissipated, there was almost no monster standing at the entrance of the sanctuary. Almost all of the monsters were torn to pieces by the shock waves of the explosion and the steel balls. More than a dozen monsters that survived the explosion were crawling out with their broken limbs, but their heads were blown to pieces by the soldiers' grape shotguns. Tangjin stepped onto the soft ground that was covered in blood and flesh. The blood had completely soaked his rain boots. He put on his mask and indicated for everyone to continue moving forward. A series of flashlights were projected into the passage. Tangjin walked forward while looking at the words and patterns on the wall. The passage under his feet was very wide and the decorations on the wall were very beautiful. However, at this time, it was filled with the corpses of monsters, making it look filthy. Tangjin walked and walked. Suddenly, he quickly walked to the front of the wall. He stared at a protruding square with a sun pattern on it for a while before reaching out his hand and pressing it down with all his strength. Everyone was confused, but then they saw a halo suddenly appear in the dark passage, and it was slowly turning bright. In less than half a minute, the entire passage was bright. Upon seeing this, everyone turned off their headlights and flashlights and looked at Tangjin, who was removing his palm from the wall. This is the lighting system of the glitter gold race. I didn't expect it to still work. This way, my original plan to build lighting equipment can be cancelled because compared to the electricity we use, the glitter gold race's energy seems to be more efficient. Tangjin muttered to himself as he walked. He glanced at the monsters that had become restless after the lighting system was activated. He raised the heavy machine gun and aimed at them. The cleaning operation has begun. Attack! Tangjin issued an official order to attack as a large group of monsters pounced at him. For a moment, the sound of gunfire rang out. Most of these monsters were only level 1 and level 2, and they could not withstand such a dense barrage of bullets and grenade attacks. One by one, they fell on the road of the charge. Even if there were any fish that escaped the net, they would be cut in half by the cultivators with shields and sabers, and they would not pose any threat to the crowd at all. After half an hour of clearing out the monsters in the hall, the team slowly advanced. After clearing out all the monsters in the tunnel, they all breathed a sigh of relief and rested while arranging their weapons and equipment. With Tangjin as a moving warehouse, they completely did not need to worry about logistics. At this moment, Tangjin was seated on a chair that was decorated with gold in the hall. He was holding a stack of paper that was faintly golden in color and was currently reading it with great interest. Although the contents of this paper were just a very common document in the Flashing Gold tribe, Tangjin was very clear that he could find very useful information from these written materials. For example, he now knew that the Shining Gold race's sanctuary was divided into many levels. In addition to the living quarters, there was a small special area that no ordinary Shining Gold race people were allowed to approach. They were currently in one of the prohibited areas in the shelter because this was the only direct entrance to the shelter. To prevent any accidents from happening, this place was completely isolated from the underground. In order to open the door from the outside, the guards inside had to cooperate and pull the other lever, which was usually closed. However, due to the monster's random collisions, the wrench was accidentally pushed to the open state. Therefore, Tangjin and the others could be considered very lucky to be able to easily open the Fallout shelter's door from the outside. When they had recovered enough, they split into several small combat teams and began to clean up the sealed rooms one by one. They did not have to pay much attention to the rooms that were open because the monsters inside had basically gathered in the hall and had been torn into pieces by the bullets. However, Tangjin did not directly take action during the cleaning process this time around. Instead, he constantly observed his surroundings through the map in order to prevent any unexpected situations from occurring. Through his heaven-defying map function, he had a panoramic view of the entire floor. He had also marked out the rooms with monsters. Tyson and the others only needed to follow Tangjin's instructions, kick the door open, and pull the trigger. By the time everyone felt exhausted, the cleaning of the entire first underground floor was already halfway done. Tangjin was extremely satisfied with this kind of highly efficient work speed. He planned to clean up this underground floor as soon as possible, so he didn't return to the surface to rest. Instead, he took out a large pile of military food from the space. It had an automatic heating function, and although the taste was ordinary, it was already very delicious for Tyson and the others who had just eaten for a few days. Qianlong was gnawing on a piece of compressed biscuit. As he chewed, he fiddled with the dagger in his hand. This was a weapon of the Flashing Gold race. It looked as though it was made of gold, but its hardness far exceeded that of ordinary gold. Moreover, this weapon gave Tangjin a strange feeling, as though it had some special effect. Jin Tang asked for the dagger. After a few simple tests, he confirmed that the dagger was made of a kind of alloy. The edge was very sharp and tough. It seemed to have a strong corrosion resistance. It looked like gold, but it was very light and had a little memory metal. If the cost of this kind of metal was very low and it was easy to make, he believed that it could absolutely replace ordinary steel and become the main material for the armor of the Holy Dragon City's soldiers. It seemed that he would have to pay more attention to the text information about this metal in the next search process. When Tangjin thought up to this point, he immediately warned everyone that they must try their best to collect any papers and books they see later. At the same time, they must ensure that they are complete. Everyone present knew that their city lord liked to read, so they all nodded in agreement. There was even someone who asked Tangjin seriously if he wanted to collect the toilet paper. In the end, he was pressed to the ground by Tai Sang and was beaten up. Follow the latest novels n/velbin.com. Tangjin didn't even need to turn his head to know that the one being beaten up was definitely the rich captain. This was because only someone with a screw loose in his head would be so talkative. However, other than this small problem, the rich captain could definitely be considered an excellent soldier. Therefore, Tangjin had also brought him along this time. When everyone saw their rich captain getting beaten up, they started to kick up a fuss. After Tangjin stopped them with a smile, the rich captain stood up with an aggrieved face and kept muttering, "Why did you beat me up?" I asked the right question. Didn't the city lord say that as long as it's paper, it should be collected? Is the paper used to wipe my ass not paper? Hearing this, Tai Sing pretended to hit him as he laughed and scolded, "If you *king speak less, no one will think you're mute. Kid, you've only used toilet paper for a few days in Holy Dragon City. Before you came to Holy Dragon City, you'd probably have collected toilet paper as if it was some wordless heavenly book." Tai Sing's words caused everyone to burst into laughter again. The rich captain didn't get angry and even scratched his head. "Haha, you're right. If I had seen a toilet paper before coming to Holy Dragon City, I would definitely have kept it as a good thing." The team leader's words caused another round of laughter from the crowd. In the next 2 days, everyone completed the cleaning work of the first underground floor without any danger. At the same time, Tangjin also discovered the entrance to the second underground floor. However, he was not in a hurry to open it. He had a feeling that the truly dangerous monsters in the Glitter Gold Tribe's sanctuary were in the space below the second underground floor. There weren't many golden spiders in the first underground floor. He didn't know how many there were below, and if there were any similar things. After receiving Tangjin's order, the residents waiting on the ground rushed in to clean up the battlefield. They moved the monsters' corpses outside and piled them up. At the same time, they dismantled and sorted out the small gold items. After the sorting was done, Tangjin would bring the gold back to the original world and hand it over to Ivanov for smelting. Tangjin did not know the total weight of the gold, but it was definitely not less than a few hundred tons. Tangjin didn't need to worry about how to sell and use so much gold because he believed that Ivanov would definitely have a way to deal with it perfectly without causing market turmoil. While carrying the monster's body, the collection of the monster's brain beads was also carried out at the same time. One by one, the brain beads stained with the monster's blood and brain matter were taken out and then thrown into the bucket at the side with a plop. After a simple cleaning and wiping, these brain beads that were as resplendent as gemstones were placed into boxes. After each box was filled with 1,000 brain beads, they would be sealed and handed over to Tangjin. After another 2 days, the entire first underground floor had been completely cleared out. He had obtained more than 6,000 level 1 brain beads, nearly 1,000 level 2 brain beads, and only a few dozen level 3 brain beads. As for the number of gold tools, Tangjin was simply unable to count them. This was because the sacred Dragon Valley was currently filled with sparkling gold. Under the illumination of the sun, it almost blinded everyone's eyes. The residents did not understand why the mayor liked to collect such heavy and soft metal, but as long as the mayor liked it, they would do as he said even if he wanted to pick up all the stones from the gravel plain. In fact, Tangjin was secretly worried as he looked at the mountain of gold in front of him. It was impossible for him to bring all this gold back to the original world. If he did, it would definitely lead to a huge mess. However, he could not allow this gold to pile up everywhere. If that happened, the sacred Dragon Valley would also become extremely chaotic. If there was something that could melt this gold in large quantities, he could use it to cast some trash cans, water tanks, and other decorations to fill up the empty Holy Dragon Valley. When the soul hosts from their original world came to the other world one day and saw the valley full of golden objects even decorated with gemstones from the mother tree's roots, the scene would definitely blind their eyes. Where else in the world could be more extravagant than the Holy Dragon Valley? When Tangjin thought of this, he felt that this idea was good. However, there was no blacksmith among his residents who was good at forging. In the endless wilderness, the best at forging was the neutral dwarves, while the elf race was the most artistic. Tangjin was not related to either of these two races, so he could only think of a way by himself. It seemed that he had to take some time to return to his original world and get some equipment that could be used to smelt gold on a large scale. It would be best if he could get some molds as well. This way, He could solve the problem of having too much gold. Now that he had a way to deal with the gold, the next thing he needed to do was to deal with the mountain of monster corpses. This was also a big problem that had to be solved as soon as possible. Otherwise, once the corpses rotted, it was likely to cause a plague or attract countless monsters that liked to eat rotten meat. Tang Jin would really be scratching his head if he were to summon another high-level flying monster. However, Tang Jin had already made plans for this situation when he moved the Flashing Gold Race's sanctuary. This was because he happened to have something that required monster flesh to be cultivated. The cornerstone of the Mother Tree of the Tree Spirit Tribe. After using it to build the Mother Tree Tower, the more flesh and blood nutrients it devours, the faster and thicker it will grow, and the more power it will provide to the residents. Now that thousands of monster corpses had been cleared out from the Flashing Gold Tribe's sanctuary, it was a great opportunity to build a Mother Tree Tower for it to devour and grow. It was a good thing that killed two birds with one stone, so why would Tang Jin miss it? Tang Jin took out the Mother Tree's foundation stone from his storage space and let it float in his hand. He looked at the Holy Dragon Valley, which appeared empty due to it being too wide, and softly said, "It's time to build a Mother Tree city and add a layer of green to the valley. However, the enemies will probably see a sea of blood." The idea of building the Mother Tree Tower City and making it the Holy Dragon City's auxiliary city had been in Tang Jin's mind for a long time. He had been waiting for a suitable opportunity, and now the time was fully ripe. Hence, Tang Jin issued an order to inform everyone in the Holy Dragon Valley that an auxiliary city would be built the next day. At that time, all the wanderers in the valley who had not obtained resident status would have the opportunity to become a resident of the Holy Dragon City. This was undoubtedly a message that made all the wanderers jump for joy. Some of them hugged each other and cried, some were so excited that they didn't know what to do, and some even sat on the ground and kept giggling, but their eyes were filled with tears of happiness. Seeing that the Lord Castellan wanted to build an auxiliary city in such a short time, the residents of Holy Dragon City, in addition to secretly guessing the ability attributes of the new city, were more prepared to deal with the monsters that attacked. Compared to the nervous and gambling-like mood of the Holy Dragon City's residents when it was first built, this time, all the Holy Dragon City's residents were very relaxed. They were only building a level 1 city tower. When the time came, the monsters that would come to attack the city would probably not be left before the Holy Dragon City's warriors had their fill of killing them. Excellent and powerful weapons and equipment, as well as sufficient and complete logistics supply, made the Holy Dragon City's residents full of confidence. The terrifying and ferocious monsters in the past seemed to be nothing more than this. There was no need for Tang Jin's arrangements at all. The Holy Dragon City's management personnel began to organize the personnel to carry out defensive preparations. With the heavy machine gun as a great killing weapon, they were even confident that they could completely block the monsters outside the valley this time. Qianlong and Tai-Seng each led a group of people and busied themselves in the Holy Dragon Valley. Although they had participated in the clearing operation of the Glitter Gold Race's shelter and had a deep understanding of the terrifying damage of firearms, they still didn't dare to be careless. They completed their respective tasks seriously. The wanderers who were about to be granted the status of residents would also come forward to help the warriors do whatever they could without anyone's invitation. In their eyes, this was their duty. There were even some wanderers who requested to personally participate in the defense line against the monsters. However, they were rejected by the relaxed and disdainful Holy Dragon City warriors. If Holy Dragon City had just been built, there would be as many warriors as there were. But now? You guys can just hide in the back and wait for a good show. In the busy and excited atmosphere, the next day came quietly. After a day and a little more than half a night of work, a huge earthen wall had appeared out of thin air in front of the Holy Dragon Valley. It was 15 meters tall and completely blocked the entrance to the Holy Dragon Valley. This earth wall was the masterpiece of Tang Jin's terrain transformation plugin. However, at the same time, Tangjin also found that this seemingly invincible plugin actually had hidden restrictions. Originally, according to Xintang's plan, he was going to use the Terrain Transformation plugin to kill all the monsters that came to attack the city. However, after some experiments, Tangjin discovered that this method did not work at all. It turned out that the terrain modification plugin would not be able to be used when there were creatures or monsters in the transformed area and nearby. However, when the creatures and monsters stayed in the buildings, the use of the terrain modification plugin would not be affected. This was also the reason why Tangjin could move the Flashing Gold Tribe Sanctuary over, but couldn't kill all the monsters that attacked the city when the building was built. Otherwise, with this super plugin that could be used for 1 minute a day, Tangjin would be able to do whatever he wanted in the nearby area. Now it seemed that the greatest use of the terrain transformation plugin was still for building and moving the terrain. It was actually very limited in battle. This terrain transformation plugin was the only application that Tangjin had downloaded that required payment. It cost 10,000 gold coins per minute, so Tangjin didn't dare to use it easily. Hence, the main force of this battle was still the Holy Dragon City's soldiers. Compared to Tangjin, who felt a little regretful, the Holy Dragon City's soldiers and residents were once again stunned by the city lord's divine power. They watched as a huge wall rose from the ground in front of the Holy Dragon Valley. At the same time, a ramp and battlements appeared on the wall. The Holy Dragon City was now completely sealed off. A giant wall completely isolated the valley from the outside. The city lord said that after they had defeated the monsters attacking the city, they could move the sandbags that had piled up in the doorway under the earth wall to make it easier for everyone to enter and exit. Currently, the giant wall was filled with Holy Dragon City's soldiers. Everyone was fully armed. They all looked towards the valley in unison, waiting for Tangjin to start the sacrifice. Under countless gazes filled with anticipation, a solemn-looking Tangjin began the sacrifice. He first dripped his blood on the mother tree's cornerstone to acknowledge it as his master. After that, he sent a large number of brain beads to the altar. His every move was filled with a sacred meaning. After Tangjin confirmed that he was going to build a city tower, the memories of the mother tree's life instantly appeared in his mind. It was an incomparably vast world that was completely covered in emerald green. On the horizon, a giant tree that looked like a god stood on the ground. It was so huge that no one could describe its specific height and size. Countless beautiful and magical creatures lived around it, happily chasing and playing. A small branch on the mother tree was enough to house countless creatures, and a fruit from the mother tree was enough to feed countless creatures. Everything was so calm, so peaceful and at ease. Until one day, the sky seemed to be torn apart, followed by countless flaming boulders falling from the sky. Countless plants and creatures died in this natural disaster. The mother tree was also hit by an incomparably huge meteorite and completely disappeared from this world. The scene changed and the mother tree's memory appeared again. This time, its size was much smaller. It was not even as thick as a branch in its prime. Moreover, the creatures that relied on it to survive this time had become the Tree Spirit clan that Tangjin had seen in the picture. The Tree Spirit tribe was a race that yearned for nature and a noble life. By drawing power from the mother tree, they had built their home into a beautiful one, and they sang and danced under the mother tree every day. Year after year, the tree spirits' demand for the mother tree's power increased, but the number of tree spirits who were willing to calm their hearts and pray to the mother tree, as well as water and fertilize it, decreased. The tree spirits, who were immersed in their joy, did not know that the mother tree was in great pain. The beneficial insects that had loosened the soil for it had been infected by the monster and were wreaking havoc inside its body, constantly destroying and devouring it. The mother tree wanted to use its own power to expel the insects, but due to the tree spirit's excessive demand, the mother tree's power had reached the point of exhaustion. The mother tree wanted to convey its pain to the tree spirits, but it was extremely sad to find that it had not been able to communicate with a single tree spirit for almost 20 years. It had no way to express its pain. The mother tree was tormented by this pain until one day, its body finally broke in half. The scene was earth-shattering, and in the mother tree's last consciousness, it saw the panicking tree spirits and the overwhelming monster Tao Wu. After reading the memories of the mother tree's two lives, Tangjin silently looked at the mini version of the small tree in front of him. After a slight transformation, he sent it to the position he had chosen in advance. Then, he looked at the giant tree that appeared out of thin air in front of him in a daze. Well, that's all for this part, truckers. See you all in the next video.